how much gold your mothers and sisters have and redistribute the property to Muslims. Not even your Mangalsutra is safe. His speech in Rajasthan became a defining moment in the recent elections. He also politicized a piece of jewelry I have worn thousands of times. His electoral defeat was a reflection of trying to separate communities that have lived side by side for centuries. On that Tuesday morning, I did wear my galibot and have done so several more times since.
Samira Hussain. That's all for this edition of the programme. I'm Pascal Harter. The producer was Caroline Bailey.
That was the BBC programme from our own correspondent. I'm Saroja Coelho.
Magandang umaga, good morning, Manitoba. Faith Fundal here in Studio 15 at Portage and Spence. This is Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app. We're going to have lots here on the program. Stay tuned. First, though, we're going to head to your CBC Winnipeg local news desk, and Heather Wells joining us with a look at news headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, a video inside an RCMP jail cell in the Paw and obtained by CBC News is highlighting why police detachments are not ideal places to house intoxicated people. John Edaway Capo died in 2019 after being picked up outside a radio station and placed in a cell in the Paw. The video shows another man inadvertently place his leg on Edaway Capo's neck. The medical examiner says had that not happened, Edaway Capo may have survived the night. We're going to hear more from the I-Team on this. And Morgan Harris's family says the pilot search of Winnipeg's Prairie Green landfill is going well. Workers started sifting through part of the landfill this month ahead of a targeted search in the area where Harris's remains and those of Mercedes Myron are believed to be. We'll hear about it in our next local news at 6:30.
Looking forward to it. Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
It's Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. I am Faith Fundal in for Marcy Mercusa here on Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. Abby Adiemi is our tech and music producer. Corey Funk is our studio director. Brad Lillies is our streaming producer here as we just get set to stream on YouTube as well. Still to come here on the program, as you've been hearing, in theory it makes sense. If we add more traffic lanes, it will fix traffic jams, right? The reality, however, is a bit more of a bumpy ride. We'll have that story in our 7 o'clock hour of the program. Also coming up in our last half hour, despite an assassination attempt on former U.S. President Donald Trump over the weekend, one of the key events in the race to the White House begins today. We'll talk about the Republican National Convention coming up in our last half hour of the program. We are expecting sun and cloud today for Winnipeg with a pretty good chance of showers early today and then a slight chance of showers later this afternoon. Still a risk of a thunderstorm with a northerly wind gusting to 40 kilometers an hour this morning. Expecting a temperature high of 24 degrees with a humidex not far away. It'll feel like 26. Stay tuned here on Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app. World Report is standing by.
On Q with Tom Power.
Jennifer Esposito grew up around the mafia on Staten Island before she left to pursue acting. After being fed up with the lack of opportunity for women in the industry, she decided to tap into her childhood for her debut feature film. She'll be here to tell you all about it.
Some questions are just better left unanswered.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Donald Trump says a tilt of his head likely saved his life. The former U.S. president is giving his first interviews since Saturday's assassination attempt. He told the New York Post he is supposed to be dead. President Joe Biden condemned the attack in an address from the Oval Office last night. Biden says it is time to lower the temperature in American politics. Today, the Republican Party kicks off its national convention in Milwaukee. The CBC's Ethel Musa is there. Ethel, what can you tell us as this convention begins?
Well, right now, downtown Milwaukee has pretty much shut down with heavy security inside and outside the venue. Organizers, appeared in good spirits yesterday while they were setting things up. And today, the convention floor is clear and prepped to receive delegates as the 4-day event gets underway. Trump's campaign and RNC organizers say everything will go ahead as planned. The Secret Service says they've made no changes to their convention security plans, which were in the works for more than a year after the attempted assassination. Biden held an address last night urging Americans to lower the political temperature, to take a step back, and to resolve differences peacefully.
Disagreement is inevitable in American democracy. It's part of human nature. But politics must never be a literal battlefield, and God forbid, a killing field.
What do we know about this ongoing investigation into the shooting?
The FBI is treating the incident as an assassination attempt and a potential act of domestic terrorism. There are a lot of questions, of course, concerning the motive behind Saturday's shooting, but the federal agency says the shooter's reasoning is still not known. Investigators are still reviewing the evidence, and they're conducting interviews to try and piece things together. The shooter's home and the vehicle were searched, and while suspicious devices were found, they were eventually rendered safe by FBI bomb technicians. The FBI also says the firearm that was used in the shooting was purchased legally, and the shooter was not known to them prior to the incident. Meanwhile, the deputy director of the FBI says agents have seen increasingly violent rhetoric online since the attack on Trump.
Thank you, Ethel.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Ethel Musa in Milwaukee. Light rain and cool temperatures are forecast for Labrador City. Officials say that will help crews stamp out a fire threatening the community. Thousands of people are out of their homes, and as Heather Gillis reports, they don't know when they can return.
There is no fire growth. There's little smoke and not very much flame. And it was a good day from a firefighting perspective.
Labrador City Mayor Belinda Adams says weather has been on their side in helping keep the flames down. And rain is in the forecast today, helping the 4 water bombers and 4 helicopters on the Labrador side trying to extinguish the fire. More are on the Quebec side. Days ago, it was an inferno just a few kilometers from Labrador City, a fire strong enough to generate its own wind, forcing thousands to flee to Happy Valley Goose Bay, 500 kilometers away. Today, the province is expected to announce details about emergency payments for evacuees. Nearly 4,000 have registered for help with the Red Cross. Meanwhile, thousands more in Wabush are still on evacuation alert, with many in need of food, baby items, and medication. Problems Mayor Ron Barron hopes they'll have solutions for soon.
Hopefully in the morning we will be able to release what we're going to do there, so stay patient, folks.
Officials are still cautioning the fire is still unpredictable, meaning it's too early to say when evacuees could return home. Heather Gillis, CBC News, Happy Valley Goose Bay.
Canada's premiers are holding their annual meeting in Halifax, and they've invited Indigenous leaders to join them for a working lunch on healthcare. But there's a big rift in this relationship, and as Olivia Stefanovich reports, Indigenous leaders say what they want is to be treated as equals.
Well, I would like to put out an offer.
For the first time in 8 years, Natan Obed is returning to the Council of the Federation. The Inuit Tapiri Kanatami president meeting with a new crop of premiers to send this message.
That we just respect each other and our jurisdictions, and when we come together and meet, that there is inherent respect.
Obed declined previous invitations to attend from the premiers, citing concerns over the meeting's format.
It unfortunately has been a regressive space.
Not much has changed since Obed last attended in 2016. National Indigenous leaders still only get one short meeting with the premiers, excluded from the rest of the week's agenda.
Changing these systems, I recognize, takes a long time. It takes a lot of relationship building, awareness raising.
Métis National Council President Cassidy Caron called for a reset at the last premiers meeting. She remains hopeful.
So it is in the best interest of these premiers to find the best ways to serve Métis people. And the best ways to serve Métis people is to work with our Métis governments and provide that support.
The premiers have set aside 2.5 hours today to hear from Indigenous leaders over lunch. Whether they will all listen and respond to a request for full inclusion remains an open question. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Halifax.
Voters in Rwanda are lining up to elect their next president. Some people arrived as early as 5 a.m. to make sure they could cast their ballot. Paul Kagame is the incumbent president. He has ruled Rwanda for nearly a quarter of a century. And although 8 candidates applied to run against him, only 2 made it to the final list. Kagame is expected to cruise to another victory today. We have an update to a story CBC News first brought you in May about Canada's first accessibility commissioner and claims he mistreated staff at the Canadian Human Rights Commission. The investigation into those claims is now complete, but as Ashley Burke tells us, the details are being kept private.
The government called it a historic appointment, hiring Canada's first accessibility commissioner in 2022. But within Michael Gottal's first year on the job, a group of staff at the Canadian Human Rights Commission raised concerns about his workplace conduct. A letter viewed by CBC News alleged Gottal had a toxic impact and there was a psychologically and unsafe work environment. Gottal's lawyer says his clients never seen that letter and responded to the workplace concerns raised with him by taking part in an external investigation that the government launched. The investigation by Quintet Consulting has now wrapped up. The Justice Department says its minister reviewed the final report and has asked Gottal and the Commission to address the report's recommendations, but wouldn't say what the findings are, citing privacy concerns. The Canadian Human Rights Commission says it accepts the report's recommendations and work is underway to implement them, but wouldn't say what they are, citing confidentiality. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
Immigration lawyers and agencies say a decades-old scam is targeting temporary foreign workers in Alberta. It involves employers, consultants, and recruiters. Advocates say in some cases they are illegally charging applicants tens of thousands of dollars for jobs. Karina Zapata has that story.
The temporary foreign workers, they don't often know better. They don't realize that this isn't the process and this isn't how you're supposed to do it.
Anila Amar, CEO of the Centre for Newcomers, has been watching the scam play out for 30 years. She says it's historically been more common in cities like Vancouver and Toronto, but she says it's happening more frequently in Alberta.
We could have a couple of people a week coming to the centre saying that they have a similar issue.
It's illegal to charge people for jobs or to help them find jobs in Canada. But those who work in the immigration space say it does happen due to a poorly structured system, a lack of enforcement, and desperation. It all sounds familiar to Sinajabeen Sheikh. She says she paid roughly $40,000 in installments to a group of immigration consultants and recruiters for a job as a food service supervisor in Calgary. But she says the described job did not resemble the tasks she was given.
It's really sad. It's heartbreaking. I've lost my resources. I've lost my finances. I've lost my, hope.
Sheikh's former employer denies it's affiliated with any immigration consultants and says her work duties aligned with her job description. The federal government says it's aware of the scam and is working to tackle it. But immigration lawyer Jathan Shori says that's a difficult feat because it goes beyond Canada.
The networks that are built overseas, how are you going to regulate that? That's not possible.
Meanwhile, the College of Immigration and Citizenship Consultants says it's cracking down on unauthorized practitioners in Canada. Karina Zapata, CBC News, Calgary.
And Karina has more on this story at cbcnews.ca. Click local and go to the Calgary page for an in-depth look at this story. That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Magandang umaga, good morning Manitoba. Faith Fundal here in Studio 15 at Portage and Spence under a severe thunderstorm warning for Winnipeg. This is Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. On the latest episode of CBC's Cross Country Checkup, callers expressed how they feel about this weekend's assassination attempt on Donald Trump. We will hear what Canadians had to say. If you walk around the Assiniboine Forest, you might hear a chorus of song. The voices, though, don't belong to humans. We sent the CBC's Jim Agapito to look into it. First, though, as families of Jeremy Skibitsky's victims prepare their victim impact statements for his sentencing hearing, a local MMIWG organization is preparing a community impact statement as well. That story first up here on Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. Stay tuned. 11 minutes after 6 o'clock. And over to your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. Heather Wells joining us. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, a local soccer organization says it is traumatized and shocked after a player was killed in a shooting late Saturday night. It happened at the Ralph Cantafio Soccer Complex on Waverley following matches there. A statement from the Canada African Cup of Nations says as players were leaving, a, quote, targeted shooting happened in the parking lot. It goes on to say the player, who is not being identified, died after sustaining serious upper body injuries. Winnipeg police are expected to give us some details later today. And with a deadline approaching, pro-Palestine protesters at the University of Manitoba say they are not done yet. They've been given until 8 this morning to dismantle their encampment or face legal action. We'll hear more in our next local news at 6:30.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. Good morning to the folks watching on CBC television and streaming us on your CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Brad Lillies is our streaming producer. Hello. Happy Monday. And a good morning as well to Abby Adeyemi, who has been following the severe thunderstorm warning. Abby, just as we were getting set to chat about the weather here, I saw the little flash outside.
Yeah, the flash happened. I was going to complain about, a damp stats, but now the thunderstorm is out. There's already a wind warning staring at us. We're actually starting damp, a little bit damp outside. We had some light rain earlier, and I can still see traces of that outside the window. Right now, 19 degrees in the city. We're expecting a mix of sun and clouds today. It's going to be like a mix. It's going to be a dance. The sun and the clouds will be making the dance, but that there's more showers in the morning and a slim chance of showers later in the afternoon. That risk of thunderstorm will stay with us all through the day. As you already know, we have that severe thunderstorm warning in effect, and the winds will be breezy from the north this morning. We will get to a high of 24 today, and tonight more partly cloudy conditions, a slight chance of showers into the evening period. The risk of thunderstorm will stay with us all through the day, and then it's going to become, the winds will become lighter as we get into the evening period. Then we'll cool off to 13. Other parts of the province, Thompson at 11, Brandon at 14, and the rest of the province seeing light rain this morning as we speak. But right now, Winnipeg, it is 19 degrees, and we're heading to a high of 24.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Abby Adeyemi, our tech and music producer. Now, I know someone who also likes to dance, just like the weather, but never dampens our mood. Corey Funk, our studio director.
Gosh, that's
good morning.
such a nice intro.
I wrote it down. I was like, I don't want to forget it. I want to write it down.
How did you know I like to dance?
It's true. Good morning.
Good morning to you. Actually, I already got a call on the commuter line this morning from RuPaul. Thanks for that call. Southbound Pembina, just before the underpass, just before Jubilee, there's a two-car collision in the right and middle lane. So you're going to want to stay left to get around that. And obviously, it's pretty early in the morning, so not too many backups at this point. But southbound Pembina, just before Jubilee in the underpass there, the right and middle lane, two-car collision. If you see anything else going on out there, that's the biggest issue right now. But give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Coming up to 15 minutes after 6 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. On the latest episode of CBC's Cross Country Checkup, callers expressed how they feel about this weekend's assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. We're asking you as well what you make of that. We'll hear what Canadians have to say in our next half hour, but you can also call our listener line 204-788-3205, 204-788-3205. A local group, as you've been hearing, is helping put together victim impact statements. Those become part of the record during the sentencing of a convicted person. Sandra DeLaurent says those community impact statements will be added to statements from the families of the women killed. Last week, Chief Justice Glenn Joyal found Jeremy Skibitsky guilty of 4 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of Rebecca Contois, Mercedes Myron, Morgan Harris, and an unidentified woman given the name Buffalo Woman. The CBC's Riley Lachak spoke with DeLaurent.
We know that not just for the community of Winnipeg, but the community our broader community of Manitoba, the province of Manitoba, the north, south, the rural area, have all been impacted by this loss, this ongoing loss. So Justice Joyal had noted that in his presentation, that there were, that this is a more global issue, and that it was important for the community. And for certain, it is important for the community. So we're hoping in the next few weeks to go out and meet with community members and see how they feel about this particular case. But we know that from Sean Lamb forward that this is an issue where people don't feel safe. And I think it's important that it go into the court record.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, how important is it that those words and those feelings are part of not just the court record, but the public record here going forward?
Yes. People often look at things anecdotally or from an emotional sense, but it's important to recognize that in Manitoba alone, there have been over 400 missing and murdered loved ones. So reading that into the record, having it validated by institutions such as the courts and by government, really, I think, will speak to the need for change, and change that is centered on what the community needs, not what someone prescribes to them.
So I know that you're going to be doing a few engagement sessions with the community and Manitobans over the coming weeks. What are you hoping to hear from Manitobans who want to help form this community's impact statement?
Well, we're not far off from a provincial election where it was an issue, and I think that the failure to search the landfill was one of the factors for a change of government. And so all Manitobans had an interest in seeing justice. So we really want to hear the voice of all Manitobans. Definitely families that have been impacted by loss, but as well, our other relatives who have stood beside us as allies. I think their voice needs to be heard as well.
Anything else that you think might be important to mention that I haven't asked, that you thought that people should hear about, not just this case, but other cases that have been ongoing here in Manitoba?
Well, what's interesting is the NCR defense, that people have used it in the past, some successful, some unsuccessful, but there seemed to be a trend in the number of people using it. So I think this very public case and the fact that the NCR defense was not recognized, I think will tell others, if you're responsible, then you'll do your time.
That is Sandra Delarond with the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Implementation Committee. That NCR she was describing is being found not criminally responsible. As you've been hearing, Chief Justice Glenn Joyal did not accept that defense. She was speaking with the CBC's Riley Leitchuk. The date for Jeremy Skibitsky's hearing has not yet been set.
On the topics that matter, your voice should be heard.
I'm really concerned.
And I'm not really happy about that.
Radio Noon is where you can voice your take. I'm Janet Stewart. From 12:30 to 1 p.m., Radio Noon opens the phone lines on one important topic.
It just brings everyone together.
Radio Noon's call-in segment, 204-780-0893. We want to hear from you, weekdays on CBC.
Well, parts of Manitoba got hit by big pieces of hail as severe thunderstorms moved throughout the province between Friday and Saturday night. And it has not gone away because Winnipeg, in this moment, is under a severe thunderstorm warning. We are expecting a high of 24 today. We'll keep you up to date as that storm goes by our region. And you can also read more about those storms in southern Manitoba at cbc.ca/Manitoba. We're at 21 minutes after 6 o'clock. she can hear singing at all hours of the day. And sometimes the song kept avid CBC morning show listener Connie Christensen to sleep, sang her to sleep, but other times shook her awake. The CBC's Jim Agapito visited her for the house concert.
We're in the backyard facing Assiniboine Forest. In my beautiful garden in my backyard, this is basically where my soul lives. I'm so blessed to be in this location because I am right in nature.
You reached out to the morning show because you basically said there are a bunch of singing animals, in fact, frogs, that I don't know if they're keeping you up at night or waking up in the morning, but tell me about that.
Well, this year, as we know, it has been very, very wet. And the frogs have been very, very happy. They basically have been singing all night and all day. And they are so loud that you can hear them easily over traffic noise, over fans, and even when we have had all the windows closed, you can still hear them.
Now, are they keeping you up at night?
They maybe sing me to sleep. And when I wake up and I hear them, I just smile. They make me happy.
The frogs are coming out more in droves than I guess in what you've seen, correct?
Oh, yes. Yes. This has been a very good reproductive year for the frogs. Well, this year, because of all the water, of all the rain, it's very swampy, really right behind us. The soil is clay and heavy, so there are ponds right behind us that normally would not stay this far into the summer. A little farther behind, there is really like a little lake that has an island, that is always there. And there's the boardwalk there that you can walk over where the bulrushes are. But this year, with all the rain and the moisture, it's swampy right behind us.
Are you seeing the frogs? Are they coming out to your yard?
They will be in my yard, in and around the plants. Sometimes they'll be on the grass, but they'll be in and around the plants. And there's also the gray Manitoba tree frog, which is gray but can also turn color to be green. And you'll find it perched on different plants and things, waiting and looking for the bugs.
And have you seen any this year?
There was one. It was sitting up on my electrical box or whatever. They do that. It's very strange. And then they will also sit on the hostas.
Which ones do they like being on?
The ones with the big leaves. And actually, later on in the summer, they liked being on brown-eyed Susans, which are a very large yellow flower. And they would sit there in the morning because they knew that's where they could get lots of breakfast.
You were a painter for many years, correct?
Yes, and I still am painting.
Has any of these frogs inspired? Have you decided, have you found any that you wanted to maybe try and paint?
Oh, all of them. They're so cute, but nature is beautiful, and there's just so many wonderful things. But yes, the frogs are really cute. I love them. And something that's very interesting about when the frogs are singing, they'll be singing away so loud, and then all of a sudden, dead stop. Nothing.
Dead
stop, quiet. So it's very curious when they do that.
And that's what you're hearing at night?
Yeah.
Is it just at night or is it all hours of the day?
It has been all hours of the day, which I find amazing because usually it has been just at night, but this year it has been all hours of the day.
Connie Christensen, longtime CBC morning show listener, speaking with the CBC's Jim Agapito. So why do they stop so quickly? Do they have a conductor that stops the singing? Doug Collicutt is a retired biologist. He ran the Manitoba Herps Atlas for years, a citizen science project focused on amphibians and reptiles. Doug also spoke with Jim.
Connie, one of our listeners, said that she could hear frogs singing in her backyard. When you hear that, what kind of frogs would that normally be in the Assiniboine Forest?
Well, at this time of year in July, probably a couple of options. You'd be looking at some boreal chorus frogs that might be calling, and perhaps even some gray tree frogs. Most of the frogs should be done by now, right? But with this big heavy rain that we've had and the new ponds that are showing up, especially the boreal chorus frogs, get kind of stimulated to try mating again, even though the females aren't going to be producing any more eggs. So the guys get excited again.
So it's not normal to see so many frogs this late in the season?
Well, with the chorus frogs, it's not unusual to get them sort of calling out of season. Like most of these guys breed, first thing early in the spring, but they breed in what are called sort of vernal ponds, spring ponds, or what we call ephemeral waters. So when those dry up in the spring after the, eggs have hatched and whatnot, and the tadpoles have made their way along, if you get new ponds showing up, it kind of re-stimulates the males to start calling again, even though they're probably not going to get a chance to breed again. This wet weather is great for frogs. We've had, good breeding seasons for a couple of years, and numbers are there. But most of the breeding goes on fairly early in the year. Some of the tree frogs are one of the later ones to breed, so they might still be calling, but they should be, well done by this time in July. They will also, the tree frogs also call not just for breeding, too. They have some sort of territorial situations where they'll call. Makes a different sort of noise, but does happen this time of year too. So
that's an interesting thing, because Connie said that there would be times where she'd hear the frogs calling and and singing, and then all of a sudden it would just go all of a sudden silent. Do you know why that might be?
Any kind of disturbance will stop the whole chorus going. They have quite good hearing. Their communication system is based on noise and hearing. So if something happens by, a bird squawks, or a person walks by, or a cat or something happens by the pond, they'll all shut up until they think the danger is gone, and then they'll slowly start up again.
So what are the other species of frogs we have in Manitoba?
Well, we have, 8 different species of frogs. In and around Winnipeg, there's really just, chorus frogs, tree frogs, leopard frogs, and Canadian toads are the main ones that we see in and around town. And the others are different parts of the province. Some are strictly down the southwest, and some are strictly from the southeast. So things are calling right now. It's not mating calling anymore. Or the males are trying, but they're not going to be mating. It's sort of a super stimulus sort of thing. All this extra water makes great habitat for them, so they get all excited about it.
They're all just shouting about all of that rain that's falling. Doug Collicutt, retired biologist, speaking with the CBC's Jim Agapito.
In my throat, my eyesight's fading, my hearing's dim. I can't get in short for the state I'm in. I'm a danger to myself. I've been starting.
That is Belle and Sebastian with Funny Little Frog. We're at 29 minutes after 6 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app. Still to come, Ottawa will soon require universities and colleges to keep track of international student numbers, or they might not be allowed to accept them anymore. We'll hear more from an international student advocate coming up in our next half hour. And on the latest episode of CBC's Cross Country Checkup, callers expressed how they feel about this weekend's assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. We'll hear what Canadians have to say after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, we are under a severe thunderstorm watch in Winnipeg right now. We do have thunderstorms with some steady rain outside, mix of sun and clouds after the system moves off today, and a high of 24. A local soccer organization says it is traumatized and shocked after a player was killed in a shooting late Saturday night. It happened at the Ralph Cantafio Soccer Complex on Waverley following matches. A statement from the Canada African Cup of Nations says as players were leaving, a shooting happened in the parking lot. It goes on to say the player, who is not being identified, died after sustaining serious upper body injuries. The president of the group says police are still investigating, and we do expect to hear details from police later today. A video inside an RCMP jail cell in the Paw and obtained by CBC News is highlighting why police detachments are not ideal places to house intoxicated people. John Edaway Capo was arrested for public intoxication in 2019 and died in a jail cell. An inquest was held last month where his family watched the last moments of his life, captured on video. CBC I-Team's Caroline Bargout reports.
In the video, you can see RCMP officers carrying John Edaway Capo into a jail cell and placing him on the floor next to two other inmates. At one point, one of the men inadvertently rested his leg on Edaway Capo's neck, and it stayed there for 40 minutes. The medical examiner testified at the inquest that had the leg been removed sooner, he may have survived the night. Jeremy Edaway Capo has been waiting 5 years to find out what happened to his dad.
He could have had another day, could have had another month, could have had another year. That's something that I'm very heartbroken about.
The inquest heard 5 days of testimony from witnesses, including that RCMP policy wasn't followed. Civilian guards who are hired to watch inmates are supposed to do physical checks every 15 minutes, but that didn't happen. A judge will write a final report and make recommendations to the province to try to prevent similar deaths from occurring. Caroline Bargout, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A search of a Winnipeg area landfill for the remains of 2 Indigenous women is one step closer. A healing lodge has been moved onto the site meters away from where the women's remains are believed to be. CBC's Riley Lachuk has the story.
Just outside of Winnipeg, it's a space families and loved ones will soon gather. A healing center meters away from where a search for the remains of 2 Indigenous women will soon begin.
Now it's just time to bring my cousin home.
Melissa Robinson is the cousin of Morgan Harris. She is one of the women who searchers will soon begin looking for, among 4 women killed by convicted serial killer Jeremy Skibitsky. The healing center is part of the work the Manitoba government has started ahead of the search. Also part of that work, a test dig in the landfill that Robinson says provided valuable information about what the families and searchers will be up against.
The test ground that they were digging up looks amazing, and receipts within that garbage are legible.
Riley Lachuk, CBC News, Winnipeg.
U.S. President Joe Biden is urging calm in the wake of Saturday's attempted assassination of Donald Trump. In an Oval Office speech last night, Biden says even in the face of strong disagreements, there is no place for violence in American politics.
I'll continue to speak out strongly for our democracy, stand up for our Constitution and the rule of law, to call for action at the ballot box, no violence on our streets. That's how democracy should work. We debate and disagree. We compare and contrast the character of the candidates, the records, the issues, the agenda, the vision for America. But in America, we resolve our differences at the battle box. That's how we do it, at the battle box, not with bullets.
Security has been stepped up in Milwaukee, the site of the Republican convention that begins today. Trump has arrived in that city. You can hear the latest on this story and other national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. A pro-Palestine encampment at the University of Manitoba vows to continue to fight a potential injunction. Last week, the school told protesters to leave its quad peacefully by this morning or face legal consequences. Victoria Kanhura speaks for the encampment. She says a proposal issued by the university early on did not meet their demands, including issuing a statement in support of Palestine.
They have claimed that the university doesn't get involved in politics. However, that is a barefaced lie. They have just kind of solely attempted to pass off things that are going on already, as opposed to really paying attention to our demands.
Kanhura says they will announce next steps later today. A long time coming is how Dakota chiefs feel about a federal government apology today. The Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations will be in White Cap, Dakota Nation near Saskatoon, meeting with 9 Lakota and Dakota First Nations from Saskatchewan and Manitoba. Sioux Valley Dakota Chief Vincent Tatchin says the apology is for the label put on the Dakota as being refugees after they came north following conflict with the U.S. in the 1800s.
I know there's several generations and grandparents and others that have endured a lifetime of living with this label, and it's unfortunate that they're not around to hear the apology.
Tatchin says that apology marks a small step in repairing the damage. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. I'm Faith Fundal here on Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app. Hello as well to the folks watching on CBC Television and on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Brad Lillies is our streaming producer. Abby Adeyemi is our tech and music producer following that severe thunderstorm passing through the city. Hello.
Good morning once again. Yes, that's passing through. There's a thunderstorm warning in effect for Winnipeg, and this will also impact St. Agathe and, of course, St. Adolphe. And you should be also noticing that in the area of MacDonald. This warning is going to be closely monitored as the winds are going to be exceeding 90 kilometers, and it's currently near Headingley, and it's moving southeast at 60 kilometers. So watch out for that, because this might cause significant damage. I think this is a time you need to strap down the trampoline.
Mm-hmm.
So,
because lots of wind.
Lots of wind. So if you've got it all set up outside, you might just want to strap it down. And we also hear the large hail may come with that, and this may be damaging some property. So brace for that. Let's now come to current Winnipeg. Temps 19 degrees. We're seeing the light rain now, and we've heard of that severe thunderstorm warning in effect. We will be expecting a mix of sun and clouds later, and then we'll warm up to 24 degrees with a breeze coming from the north. Heading west to Brandon, currently 13 degrees. We're also seeing light rain at the moment. Anticipate a mix of sun and clouds. A chance of showers and thunderstorm would come with that. Breezy times, and highs would get to 24. Thompson is currently at 10 degrees and mostly cloudy. Expect mainly cloudy skies, a slight chance of showers this afternoon, and you'd warm up to 14. Churchill is at 1 degree at the moment, and you're seeing light rain. The rain will be ending later in the morning, and then we'll see some cloudy skies with fog patches, but that should be clearing by the noon period, and you'd warm up to 6. Good morning to folks in Dauphin. You're currently at 16 at the moment. It's cloudy there. We'll see a mix of sun and clouds today. There's a chance of showers sometime this morning and late in the afternoon, coming with a risk of thunderstorms. You'd get to a high of 22. Gimli sitting at 17, heading to a high of 24. Steinbach at 18, heading to a high of 24 also. And final, Morris is at 17 degrees. Today's forecast for the Pembina Valley region, we're expecting a mix of sun and clouds, some showers this morning, and then slightly you see some more showers in the afternoon and a risk of thunderstorm, and you will be warming up to 24. Right now, Winnipeg, we are at 19 degrees.
All right, thanks very much. Abby Adeyemi, our tech and music producer. We're going to hear what Canadians had to say, expressing their feelings about this weekend's assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. That was the question, the topic on CBC's Cross Country Checkup. We'll hear more about that in this half hour. First, though, Corey Funk, our studio director, also watching the commute. Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, I got a call about half an hour ago or so from RuPaul. She said that there is a collision. There was a collision on southbound Pembina, right in the underpass just before Jubilee. I was blocking the right and middle lane, partially the middle lane. So keep left to get around that. That may be still an issue, cause some backup. So look out for that. Other than that, it's been a pretty straightforward commute so far. But if you're walking, bike, and drive and you see something going on, let me know what you're seeing. That number to call, 204-788-3093. 3.
All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Corey Funk, our studio director. I'm Faith Fundal here on Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. Krista Lee Ramlakan also joining us now with your business report. Good morning.
Good morning, Faith.
Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland hinting at more trade action against China. What do we know about that so far?
Well, she plans to hold talks with business and labor groups this week about more trade barriers against Chinese-made vehicles. And in an interview with Bloomberg News, suggested the government may go beyond vehicles as well. So last month, the government announced a public consultation on how to respond to China making a lot of lower-cost EVs. However, China denies allegations it's flooding the market with cheap goods. It also says tariffs could undermine trade and economic cooperation between Beijing and Ottawa. Now, the government, of course, is also facing pressure after it promised billions of dollars in subsidies to lure all of these automakers to set up EV battery plants here in Canada. And the Canadian auto industry is pushing it to put up barriers to Chinese electric vehicles to protect local jobs and wages. Now, of course, we know Canada relies heavily on trade with the U.S., and it is looking to align itself with the Group of 7 allies. That's after the Biden administration unveiled plans to hike tariffs on Chinese goods, and the European Union announced new levies as high as 48% on Chinese vehicles. And Faith, right now, Canada currently imposes about a 6% on Chinese vehicles.
All right. Let's talk about artificial intelligence. There have been a lot of advances to it. Can AI be an actual author of something then?
Well, you know what? The Federal Court of Canada is being asked to decide in a new copyright case. So the University of Ottawa's Canadian Internet Policy and Public Interest Clinic wants the court to declare that only humans can be considered authors under copyright law. So it is the first court case in the country testing how the Copyright Act treats AI-generated content. And the clinic says this is the time to do it given the volume of AI-generated content that's being produced right now. Now, the clinic says copyright law grants powerful rights, and it's important that they do not extend to things that are not human. And the case challenges a registration made 2 years ago by an intellectual property lawyer from India. So he used AI to combine his own photo of a sunset with Vincent van Gogh's The Starry Night painting. And he went around trying to copyright the image. Now, the U.S. refused. Its status is unclear in India. But here in Canada, where the Canadian Intellectual Property Office grants copyright applications instantaneously and without verification, the image was granted copyright registration. Now, Innovation Canada, that's where the Intellectual Property Office is housed, says the system is set up so that the courts determine authorship. It says if someone, can make an application with a court if they believe that a work does not follow the Copyright Act. So this new case argues that the Canadian Intellectual Property Office is setting a precedent that it accepts AI authorship and has led to Canada gaining publicity as one of the only jurisdictions in the world recognizing copyright in works authored by AI.
I imagine there will be some court cases soon to come.
Yes.
Let's talk about some businesses going to the dogs lately, but it's actually in a good way. What do we know?
Yes. So a growing number of restaurants are adding dog-centric items like pagaritas and barcouterie boards.
My goodness.
So, bars are offering mini picnic tables on their patios, and even big chains are in on the trend. A&W had $2 burger patties for dogs last month, and Shake Shack Canada is selling custard with dog biscuits. And of course, Starbucks has those cups of whipped cream known as puppuccinos or pup cups. Now, reservation company OpenTable suspects the trend stems from a boom in pet ownership. So the Canadian dog population rose by 200,000 to almost 8 million between 2020 and 2022. And a survey OpenTable commissioned of 1,000 dog owners in Canada found that more than a third dine out with their pets and almost half do so on a weekly basis. The survey found about 62% of owners have experienced difficulty finding pet-friendly spots. So that's maybe why some businesses are doing this. And of course, it's becoming easier as some provinces have reworked health laws to allow dogs into some parts of restaurants.
I almost made this mistake, Crystal. I was at the St. Norbert's Farmers Market, and there were these beautiful looking treats, and I was about to have some, and the very, very kind person said, you were not going to like those. Those are dog treats. So it's something to be aware of. The markets, the Monday morning markets, how are they doing so far?
In Europe, stocks are lower. Germany, the UK, and France are all down. In Asia, markets are mostly slipping. Japan is down. Shanghai is up. Hong Kong is down. Oil is down 13 cents to 82.08 U.S. per barrel. Gold is up $2.80 to $2,423.50 U.S. per ounce. And the dollar is down 0.06 of a cent to 73.3 cents U.S.
Have a good Monday morning, and we'll talk to you soon. Take good care.
You too, Faith.
That's Crystal Ramlakan with your business news. We're at 14 minutes before 7 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. Still to come, new proposed rules for international students studying in Canada. We will get the details from an international student advocate still to come. First, though, former U.S. President Donald Trump survived an assassination attempt at a campaign rally on Saturday. In the aftermath, CBC's Cross Country Checkup asked callers, what's your reaction to what's happening in the United States right now? What needs to be done to take the temperature down from here? Here is what some callers shared with guest host Ismaila Alfa, starting with a documentary filmmaker who was at the rally.
I'm actually from Toronto, so I was just outside the security perimeter in the rally grounds. Trump had begun to speak. He had been speaking for only 5 minutes when the gunshots did go off, which I heard and moved towards them to shoot footage. People were streaming out. In the beginning, most people were running. They were distressed, but eventually the crowd did calm down. It was actually kind of remarkable how calm they became. And it sounded like fireworks at first. People didn't understand it was gunshots right away. And it was also very quickly that conspiracy theories started to develop. And on top of that, after the shooting, they are even more convinced that this means Trump is guaranteed to win. They don't believe the polls. It's certainly not going to help if Trump increases his rhetoric in response to this.
I honestly thought that it would happen months ago. I was like, things are getting crazy and somebody's going to try something. The gun violence in the States and the January 6th attack, Trump almost made it a normal thing for political violence. He did things that no politician has done in my memory. And he made it a normal thing, and now he has become the victim, and he's that type of guy that's going to take advantage of it. If they didn't kill him, well, he was just wounded, but he could still do the fist pump, and he will move on. It's sad, really.
To lower the temperature, both sides have to focus on the issues that are facing the country. If I was out of work, finding it hard to feed my family, and the two leaders are bickering about belittling each other, it doesn't solve anything. And that's the problem, unfortunately. It used to be that we take pride in using the ballot box, not the bullet.
I was born in Canada, but I lived my whole life in the States, and I moved back up to Canada in 2017. I wasn't surprised, and I don't mean that for it just being Donald Trump. There was one point when we lived in Milwaukee, we went to the shooting range. This is when Obama was president. Yeah. They had shooting targets. They had Obama's face. So I'm surprised nothing hasn't happened sooner. It's a simmer that's boiling under, and it's starting to boil over. And so I don't know if anything's going to actually fix it, unfortunately, without a bottom-out, build-back-up kind of situation.
I think it's maybe a good time to focus on some of the symptoms of this, more what caused it, and maybe how we can go about changing these root causes. I've noticed like a trend in the past little bit of like polarizing language. It's not just coming from one side, it's coming from generally all sides of any democratic discussion these days. And it kind of seems to be driven by this desire for sound bites or gotcha moments put on TikTok to drive popularity and views instead of having these longer form, more difficult to have thought through discussions between political parties. It's more one person shouting at another instead of discussing how best to achieve what Canadians are looking for. We're kind of seeing how social media has kind of warped a lot of different aspects of life, and maybe we're coming to an inflection point in which our current form of democracy can get another improvement as it has over the centuries. What that looks like, I have no idea.
Some callers on Cross Country Checkup yesterday. We are asking what your reaction is to what's happening in the U.S. right now. What needs to be done to take the temperature down from here? You can share your thoughts on our listener line, 204-788-3205, 204-788-3205. And we'll continue this conversation because despite that assassination attempt, one of the key events in the race to the White House begins today. We'll talk about the Republican National Convention coming up in our 8 o'clock half hour of the program.
I would recommend Indigenous pathways to other Indigenous storytellers because we can amplify each other's voices.
Indigenous storytellers, CBC wants to elevate your voice.
We need more Indigenous people telling Indigenous stories, and this program gives people that opportunity to do so.
A 9-month paid development opportunity. Visit cbc.ca/pathways to apply in Winnipeg today.
9 minutes before 7 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. We are expecting sun and cloud later in Winnipeg, but we are still under a severe thunderstorm warning, expecting a high of 24 degrees. Ottawa plans to stop processing study permits for colleges and universities that don't track international student enrollments. The move requires institutions to report to the Federal Immigration Department to make sure students are attending and following permit rules. But some experts worry this could jeopardize the privacy rights of international students. Sabram Rowe is organizer of Migrant Workers Alliance for Change, joining us in Toronto. Welcome to the program. Good morning.
Good morning, Faith.
Sabram, why does the federal government want schools to track international student enrollment more closely?
I mean, there are 3 key things to know about these proposed changes. One, which is the greater tracking and reporting required by the college or university, but also 2, there are more bureaucratic hurdles for international students to do things like change their schools. They're now going to have to apply for a whole new permit and wait for that permit before they can go to a new school. And 3, there are restrictions on how many hours international students can work off campus, and that's only 24 hours of work off campus. So the federal government is attempting to address quote-unquote integrity challenges, right? But what we really need to know is that the real blow to the integrity of the immigration system comes from how employers or your institutions, as well as profiteers, including housing profiteers, are taking advantage of international students and migrants simply because they know that migrants have fewer rights. And so a regulatory mechanism is definitely, between federal and provincial partners, is definitely a step in the right direction. But it has to be designed with the aim of protecting and supporting international students instead of trying to keep them out or trying to punish them. The federal government has recently been so focused on numbers lately that what's really getting lost is people and the realities of their studying, working, and living conditions here. And so we're calling on the Prime Minister as well as Immigration Minister Mark Miller to ensure that people have rights, not caps, rights, not punishment. And the way to do that is to end restrictions on work, ensure more support for international students, and also ensure permanent resident status for all so that everybody has the same rights and protections.
So you've reflected a whole bunch of different things there. When you say that things are missing, how do you get there? How do you reach that goal that you're describing?
Mm-hmm. So let's look at something like the 24-hour work restriction. We are all seeing that when we go to the grocery store, many of us have to take food out of our baskets and put them back because it's so expensive. How many of us right now can make ends meet working only 24 hours? This is hard even for both domestic students and their families, as well as international students and their families. The international students face immense financial pressure, especially in the last couple of years, where tuition fees for international students have just absolutely skyrocketed in institutions across Canada. You know, Statistics Canada report that looked at tuition fees found that international undergraduate students are paying, you won't believe this, 429% more in tuition fees than domestic students. 429% more. This means that more international students are having to take out massive educational loans, are having to work and when they go to work, they're facing employers who refuse to pay the minimum wage or who refuse to give them breaks or refuse to hold up their end of basic labor rights. And when one section of our workforce, when one section of our community is made vulnerable and has fewer rights, it hurts all of us. And so the call to end restrictions on work for international students means and ensure permanent resident status for all is a call for the whole floor for all of us, whether we're migrants or citizens or permanent residents, to be raised so that we have more robust rights and fairness for all.
So it sounds like you don't accept the reason why the federal government has imposed these rules in terms of ensuring that the purpose of people who come here is to study.
Yeah, I mean, I think they are trying to attempt to address some measures, but taking a numbers-based approach isn't going to work, right? Because people aren't numbers, right? We're real people. We have real issues and concerns. And when international students are speaking up and voicing the priorities for change that they have and the changes that need to take place, the federal government has to listen and really try to resolve them by implementing pragmatic solutions. But a numbers-based approach will always fall short of the mark, right? And so these changes haven't been implemented yet. There is, around 2 weeks. And so we're calling on Prime Minister Trudeau and Immigration Minister Mark Miller really right now to ensure that people have rights, that there is to make it fair and to ensure permanent resident status for all.
Sarah, before you go, we just have 30 seconds here. If not numbers, then what metric would you want the federal government to use?
It's numbers in addition to conditions and the stories to actually address the real issues. The issues here isn't about reporting or tracking or study permits. The issue is that this has become a breeding ground of exploitation. And the way to address it is to ensure people have rights and can speak up to change the conditions that give rise to exploitation in the first place. And that's permanent resident status for all.
We'll have to leave it there. Sarum, thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah Moreau, organizer of Migrant Workers Alliance for Change. Let's head to your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. And Heather Wells joining us now. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, a video inside an RCMP jail cell in the Paw and obtained by CBC News is highlighting why police detachments aren't the ideal places to house intoxicated people. John Edaway-Capo died in 2019 after being picked up from outside a radio station and placed in a cell. The video shows another man inadvertently place his leg on Edaway-Capo's neck, where it stays for 40 minutes. The medical examiner in an inquest said had that not happened, Edaway-Capo may have survived the night. We'll hear more. And with a deadline approaching, pro-Palestinian protesters at the University of Manitoba say they are not done yet. They have been given until 8 this morning to dismantle their encampment or face legal action. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 7:30.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells from your CBC Manitoba local news desk. A reminder that the lights are flashing red in all directions at Morley and Osborne. Treat it as an all-way stop before proceeding into the intersection. Again, that's at Morley and Osborne. Lights flashing red for all directions. Still to come, some young people are choosing abstinence from romantic relationships, branding it boy sober. We'll hear from a relationship therapist about the trend. I'm Faith Fundal in for Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and of course everywhere on the CBC Listen app and on YouTube as well. Goodbye to the folks who are watching on CBC Television, and we'll see you folks on YouTube. Brad Lillies is our streaming producer. Abby Adiemi is our studio technician, and Corey Funk is our studio director. I am Faith Fundal. We'll talk to you after World Report. Stay tuned.
Today on The Current.
It's really not good enough. We have to put ourselves in the shoes of people living with diabetes. I'm Duncan McHugh. Diabetes patients in South Africa are running out of insulin pens, all because the company that makes them is selling them instead to people in the West, who are using them to inject new weight loss drugs. Coming up on The Current.
The Current, this morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Donald Trump says he is supposed to be dead. In one of his first interviews following his assassination attempt, Trump praised the Secret Service for their swift response. He tells the New York Post they hit him so hard trying to shield him from the bullets, his shoes fell off. President Joe Biden delivered an address from the Oval Office last night. Biden joined the growing chorus of leaders around the world condemning political violence. We get more from the CBC's Chris Reyes.
I want to speak to you tonight about the need for us to lower the temperature in our politics.
Speaking from the Oval Office, President Joe Biden called for unity and calm following Saturday's attempted assassination of his rival, Donald Trump.
A former president was shot, an American citizen killed, while simply exercising his freedom to support the candidate of his choosing. We cannot, we must not go down this road in America.
The message comes as the Republican Party kicks off its convention to officially nominate Trump as their candidate for president. Trump landed in Milwaukee Sunday afternoon. He has yet to address the public since he was shot in the ear during a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania on Saturday. Police have identified the gunman as 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks. Crooks was shot and killed by police after he fired at the former president. Also killed a supporter in the crowd, 50-year-old Corey Comparatori.
It's time to cool it down.
In an interview with the Washington Examiner posted late last night, Trump said he's completely rewriting his convention speech in light of what happened. The question now, what kind of tone he'll set when he takes the podium to accept his party's nomination. Chris Reyes, CBC News, Milwaukee.
The Federal Bureau of Investigation says it is still trying to determine a motive for the shooting. Right now, officials say they are trying to retrace the suspect's steps. Suspicious devices were found inside his home and vehicle. They had to be rendered safe by the bomb squad. There are several questions about the Secret Service's actions on Saturday, one being how the suspect was able to get close enough to take a shot at Donald Trump. The House Oversight Committee has called on the head of the Secret Service to testify at a hearing next week, and House Speaker Mike Johnson has promised a full investigation by Congress. Canada's premiers are holding their annual meeting in Halifax, and they've invited Indigenous leaders to join them for a working lunch on healthcare. But there's a big rift in this relationship, and as Olivia Stefanovich reports, Indigenous leaders say what they want is to be treated as equals.
Well, I would like to put out an offer.
For the first time in 8 years, Natan Obed is returning to the Council of the Federation. The Inuit Tapiri Kanatami president meeting with a new crop of premiers to send this message.
That we just respect each other and our jurisdictions, and when we come together and meet, that there is inherent respect.
Obed declined previous invitations to attend from the premiers, citing concerns over the meeting's format.
It unfortunately has been a regressive space.
Not much has changed since Obed last attended in 2016. National Indigenous leaders still only get one short meeting with the premiers, excluded from the rest of the week's agenda.
Changing these systems, I recognize, takes a long time. It takes a lot of relationship building, awareness raising.
Métis National Council President Cassidy Caron called for a reset at the last premiers meeting. She remains hopeful.
So it is in the best interest of these premiers to find the best ways to serve Métis people. And the best ways to serve Métis people is to work with our Métis governments and provide that support.
The premiers have set aside 2.5 hours today to hear from Indigenous leaders over lunch. Whether they will all listen and respond to a request for full inclusion remains an open question. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Halifax.
Rwandans are voting today in the country's presidential election. The vote is expected to extend President Paul Kagame's long rule in the East African nation. Kagame has been president since 2000. 30 years ago, he was a rebel leader who fought Hutu extremists to stop the genocide. As freelance reporter Isaac Lucando tells us, Kagame has been criticized by human rights groups and democracy watchers.
You can't fake unity, you can't fake excitement, you can't fake a turn-up like this one.
With campaigns concluded, Paul Kagame looks set to maintain his hold on power after nearly 25 years as president. He has received praise for rebuilding Rwanda after the 1994 genocide that killed over 1 million people. While some see Kagame as a visionary leader, others, including some human rights groups, view him as an oppressive despot. There are around 9 million Rwandans registered to vote, 2 million of them voting for the first time. Supporting the Democratic Green Party of Rwanda, Claudine Uwimana is one of them. I have noticed it is a good party with clear policy, she says, and we're living in a democratic country where everyone holds the right to adhere to a political party of his or her own choice. There are only 2 other presidential candidates in this election. 6 others were barred from running by the state's election commission. Analysts argue Kagame's opponents have limited name recognition, money, and organizational capacity to mount a serious challenge against him. They expect Kagame to win this election. They believe his potential re-election could bring stability, but also draw global attention due to human rights abuse allegations and tensions with the Democratic Republic of Congo. Provisional election results are expected by July the 20th. Isaac Lucando for CBC News, Dar es Salaam, Tanzania.
Al-Shabaab is claiming responsibility for a car bombing in Somalia's capital. At least 5 people were killed and 20 others were injured. The car bomb exploded outside a restaurant in Mogadishu late yesterday. This man worked in the restaurant. He says he left just before the bomb went off. And now he is praying for his colleagues and customers. Many of them were gathered there to watch the Euro 2024 soccer final. Security and government workers meet there at night. The Islamist militant group says that's why it targeted the restaurant. Emergency room doctors have to strike a delicate balance when prescribing opioids. They have to treat that patient's pain, but be careful not to overprescribe the drugs and potentially help fuel an addiction crisis. As Megan Fitzpatrick tells us, a new study could help ER doctors develop prescribing guidelines.
Smaller prescriptions, more carefully targeted to the cause of pain, could reduce the risk of misusing opioids, according to a new study in the Canadian Medical Association Journal.
Opioids have a place, they can help.
Dr. Raoul Daou, one of the study authors, said researchers are trying to find the right balance between prescribing enough to treat someone's pain, but not too much that they'll have pills left over. He hopes the findings will help guide ER doctors, especially those reluctant to prescribe opioids because of the overdose crisis.
Yes, I really hope that physicians are going to be more precise in their prescription.
The study involved more than 2,000 patients who went to emergency rooms in Quebec and Ontario for fractures, back pain, and other non-chronic conditions. They tracked how many opioids they took in the 2 weeks after they were discharged. A majority took a pill on the first day, but by day 14, only 12% were still on the medication. The study also found those with back pain and fractures needed to take the opioid for longer than those with abdominal pain.
So it's great to have a much bigger picture to go by.
Dr. Emily McDonald teaches medication safety at McGill University. She calls this a useful study.
We now know with some certainty that we're prescribing too many opioids.
To limit the amount of unused medication, Daou says pharmacists could dispense only half of a prescription at the outset, and if the patient needs the rest, they could go back for it. Megan Fitzpatrick, CBC News, Toronto.
Copenhagen is trying to get tourists to develop some new green habits. It has launched a pilot program to reward eco-friendly behaviors, including walking, taking public transport, and collecting litter. Rike Holm Peterson works for the city.
So if you collect waste, plastic waste, and go to the National Gallery of Denmark, then you can turn the plastic waste into art. That would be one example.
Green habits can also earn you a free coffee or a glass of wine, even a kayak rental at some places. Peterson says it may not make a big difference to Copenhagen's overall sustainability, but
we hope for a ripple effect that we are not only inspiring the people here, but they will be inspired, go back home, so we affect even more people with it.
The program runs for 4 weeks this summer. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Magandang umaga. Good morning, Manitoba. Under a severe thunderstorm warning for Winnipeg this half hour, I'm Faith Fundal. This is Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. CBC News has obtained disturbing video of the last moments of a man's life. John Edawe Capo died in an RCMP jail cell in 2019 after being detained for intoxication. Why his family wants people to see the video. Also coming up, we'll find out why easing traffic woes along Winnipeg's Route 90 might not be a smooth ride. First, though, as Gen Z navigates the dating world and messy dating apps, some are choosing to abstain from relationships altogether. They are choosing to live boy sober. What does it mean? We'll learn more coming up here on the program. Stay tuned. And good morning to the folks streaming us on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Brad Lillies is our streaming producer. To our CBC Winnipeg local news desk, Heather Wells is there. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, a local soccer organization says it is traumatized and shocked after a player was killed in a shooting late Saturday night. It happened at the Ralph Cantafio Soccer Complex on Waverley following matches there. A statement from the Canada African Cup of Nations says as players were leaving, a shooting happened in the parking lot. And it goes on to say the player, who is not being identified, died after sustaining serious upper body injuries. We'll hear more about that. And Morgan Harris's family says the pilot search of Winnipeg's Prairie Green landfill is going well. Workers started sifting through part of the landfill this month ahead of a targeted search in the area where Harris's remains and those of Mercedes Myron are believed to be. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 7:30.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. We're at 12 minutes after 7 o'clock, and just like that, Abby Adiemi, the severe thunderstorm warning is gone.
Yes, it's gone. So a relief for folks out there wondering if they have to strap down stuff. That warning is over for Winnipeg, Senegat, Senadolf, and the RM of MacDonald. Right now, 17 in the city. We are seeing light rain still. Later today, we should be expecting a mix of sun and clouds. That would be what the forecast would look like for the rest of the day. There's still a good chance of showers in the forecast and more, showers into late afternoon. And that risk of thunderstorm will stay with us, and winds will become breezy from the north this morning. We will be reaching the high of 24. And for tonight, partly cloudy skies. Will see a slight chance of showers in the evening. Still more risk of thunderstorm to go with that. And then we'll cool off to 13. And if we look at tomorrow, it's still the same condition. We're going to wake up to risk, a mix of sun and clouds and some morning showers. Up north, Thompson is at 10 degrees at the moment. Thompson is at 10 at the moment. Churchill at 1, and the rest of the southern part of the province all hovering around 16, all the way from Brandon to Morris, also seeing light rain at this time.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Abby Adiemi, our tech and music producer. Corey Funk is in studio watching the commute. Hello.
Hello. Yeah, really one issue out there right now. It's at Morley and Osborne. The lights are flashing red right now in all four directions. So you treat that as a four-way stop. But if you see anything else going on out there, if you see some backups around Morley and Osborne, or anything else you want to tell me about, if you're walking, biking, driving, would love to hear from you. That number to call, 204-788-3093.
"14 minutes after 7 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1, I'm Faith Fundal. Fed up with the endless swipe of dating apps and messy hookup culture, some Gen Z women say they're choosing not to have sex or date for a set period of time. Instead, they are living boy sober. The trending term refers to young people who want to focus their energy on self-care, healing, or reflection around dating and relationships. It is akin to abstinence or celibacy. Carlin Costa is a psychotherapist and clinical sexologist. I spoke with her on Friday.
Hi, good morning.
Talk more about this choice for, and in many ways, celebration of abstinence. What do you think?
Yeah, you know what? I really love this. I really love that we're having this conversation, and I really love that dating is kind of trending towards this because we shouldn't be surprised. This isn't the first time we've seen this. This is how my grandmother dated, right? I'm sure you can relate to that. I'm sure all the grandparents out there can relate to that. There was a courtship that had to happen before you connected sexually with somebody. You know what I mean? And we had to reclaim that space in the 80s, in the 90s, in the early 2000s. And I think that this is just a reflection of the pendulum swinging the other way and bringing the focus back to intentional dating and intentional connections and bringing humanity back to dating because I'm tired of dating apps,
Yeah, and it seems like a lot of other folks are as well. I mean, it's interesting, right? Because as you mentioned, this is not a new thing, and it almost sounds like this is a rebranding of the word abstinence. What do you think it is about where we are now as a society, but in particular, younger folks? Why do you think this is something that makes sense for them, that this is something that they care so much about?
Well, I think there's a few factors here, right? So I think one of the primary factors that is leading people to be more intentional about dating is being more intentional about where I invest my time, my energy, and especially my money. You're buying groceries in this economy. It's pretty expensive, right? So when we are dating someone, when we are investing time, if it's between a person or my academic career, for example, right? People are seeing that there's much more of, a payout when I am spending time investing in some of these spaces versus, trying to navigate red flags, green flags, beige flags of dating when we're not sure what the outcome is going to be in that.
Is it new that we also have folks on another part of this spectrum, folks who call themselves involuntarily celibate or incels, who tend to be younger men? What do you make of that other side, that gender dichotomy?
Yes, I do appreciate this question because that incel movement can feel really scary to people, right? I'm sure it's scary for the men who are in it, and it's definitely scary for the women who are observing it, right? But, the truth is incels are not real, right? There's no such thing as being involuntarily celibate. What that implies is that, women are keeping something from men, right? And trying to purposefully hurt them. But what this, incel culture really is a reflection of is a laziness because men are, not used to having to be called to doing the emotional work.
Right.
And women are tired of doing the emotional labor. And this is actually, a bigger reflection of how we have failed men, in my opinion. How we have failed men to bring them into broader conversations about mental health, broader conversations about what does depression look like in men, what does anxiety look like in men. And I think that this is going to bring that up and allow men to be spotlighted in how are you connecting in a meaningful way, not only with yourself, but with other people, and teaching men how to, express not from a place of need, but from a place of value.
That's a very empathetic way of approaching this. Some folks say, well, no, I'm not going to make even any space for that. What do you think?
No, I think we absolutely have to make space for that. I actually consider myself a feminist, but feminism is not feminism without the inclusion of men, and I think it's really important when we're talking about dating to have all sides of the conversation in, and especially as a mental health professional. Men deserve to take up space just as much as women do, but, we have to talk about how it can be intentional with clear and healthy boundaries, but with purpose. And the purpose is the reclamation of connection. And what does that mean now beyond just screens, beyond dating apps? Our grandparents knew it, I think it's time we relearn it.
But back then, did we also have a conversation around when something like this might cross the line from self-care to isolation, for example, something that hinders instead of heals?
Yeah, and I think that that's a really great conversation. I see this with my own patients, especially after people have experienced big traumas or assaults of some kind, right? I tell people after a divorce, for example, if you've finished a long-term relationship, you need 4 seasons of single before you really are ready emotionally to get back into the game, right? So I really see this as an opportunity for people to get back into, hey, what are my intentions with dating? What is my intentions, and what does it look like to invest in myself? And what does it look like to invest in a meaningful way into somebody else beyond just, economic prosperity?
Right. So when you think sort of long-term here, we're also seeing that younger folks and Gen Z specifically are having less sex in general.
Yes.
Have we heard about what potential social ramifications might be?
Yeah, and just to reflect, especially back on that question that you did just ask me as well, right? I think it's really tied in, which is the line is if you are feeling isolated, and isolated meaning you're not connecting meaningfully with your own community, your family, your friends, your best friend, the neighbor beside you, and, you're spending every Friday night alone, every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night alone. That's when I, as your therapist, start to get a little bit worried, because now we're talking about potentially informing anxiety in our body or depressive statures in our body, right? So I think it really is about looking at, am I isolating myself from everybody, or am I, taking steps to create meaningful narrative and community with another person?
Carlin, before you go, a lot of this conversation is not surprising for many folks. Have you been surprised yet in this conversation, that something that you have not yet heard that really piqued your interest?
No, you know what? It really not too much surprises me. I've been doing this work for a really long time. I do think what is surprising, though, is how men are speaking up now, and I really commend men that are speaking up in really positive ways to learning, what is important for them in relationships, and also seeing men sit back and listen to women and really take in, hey, this is how women have been kind of living in fear in their bodies, in their communication. You can think back to the conversation that TikTok blew up in, about a month ago, which is, if you're a woman and you're in the forest with a man or a bear, what is scarier to you, right? I think that really just reflected to women and men, this is the state with which we are moving. And this is where we want to be? Is this where we want to connect from, So I'm really excited that the pendulum is swinging the other way and bringing more intention and value in expanding how we do relationships in a whole new way.
Carlin, it's really a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you for making time, and take good care.
Thank you.
Carlin Costa is a psychotherapist and clinical sexologist. Perhaps Winnipeg's Leith Ross was ahead of the curve on the boy sober trend when they put this next song on YouTube. It clearly struck a nerve even back then. It now has 1.3 million views. Here they are with We'll Never Have Sex.
Kissed me just to kiss me. No
Out of Winnipeg, that was Leith Ross with We'll Never Have Sex. 19 degrees at the Forks this hour. Expecting a temperature high of 24 degrees. That severe thunderstorm warning is now gone, but we do still have a risk of a thunderstorm as the day progresses. Sun and cloud for the rest of today. Still to come, we'll find out why easing traffic woes along Winnipeg's Route 90 might not be a smooth ride. That's still to come in our next half hour of the program. At the 25 minutes after 7 o'clock, we have Scott Reguer joining us now for more on what's making sports headlines. Good morning.
Hey there, Faith.
Scott, what stood out for you from what was a pretty busy weekend in soccer around the globe?
Yeah, well, I think, Faith, that Canada was at least eliminated by the best team at the Copa America. Argentina, which edged the Canadians in the semis, eked by Colombia last night to win the final. It took place in Miami and was about an hour and a half late getting started because of security issues. Troves of fans breached the gates of Hard Rock Stadium, resulting in spectators sitting in the wrong seats or on steps or elsewhere for those who got in without tickets at all. According to Argentina coach Lionel Scaloni, it's part of the reason his team started so poorly in this match.
It is tough to explain what happened before the game. We had players waiting for their family members to get to the stadium, waiting for an hour. And we had to start a match without knowing where your family members were. We were watching videos, and we started the match under those conditions. And I think that the players from Colombia were going through the same thing. It was very weird.
Yeah, and very scary, Faith, I'm sure, as security problems have marred this Copa America, which is being played in the U.S. During the semifinal, another of the semifinals, Uruguay star Darwin Nunez climbed to the stands at one point and threw punches at Colombian fans who'd broken into a section meant just for Uruguayan family members. There's been much talk, Faith, about this tournament being a dress rehearsal for the World Cup to be held in North America in 2026. If so, there is much work to be done to make sure that'll be held safely.
What do you make then of Canada's performance at Copa America?
Blown away. And I've watched footy since I was a kid and followed this team. Blown away by the performance. Remember, Faith, the Canadians only got into this tournament by edging Trinidad and Tobago in a last-chance repechage game that was necessary to fill out the expanded Copa field of 16 teams. Canada was playing under a new coach with an entirely new system that they only had a few weeks to embrace. And with all of that to deal with, they finished fourth and, frankly, should have finished third. They outplayed the Uruguayans on Saturday night before bowing out on penalty kicks. Here is that new coach, Jesse Marsh.
We're still a young team. If you look at their team, they have experienced players across the board, and we're still developing that. I think on the day we had 8 MLS players, 2 players that had played in MLS, and an 18-year-old on the pitch. And to play like that is a big statement on the direction of this team.
Hear, hear. Breakout performances by winger Jacob Schaffelberg and midfielder Ismail Kone are just a couple of reasons to be very excited, Faith, about what Canada could muster under Marsh 2 years from now. Meantime, we got a glimpse yesterday at another starlet who is poised to make his mark at the 2026 World Cup. Just a day after he turned 17, Lamine Yamal led Spain to a Euro title over England. Yamal assisted on the opening game. He was named the young player of the tournament. As for old Blighty, they still haven't won a major tournament, Faith, since 1966, much to the chagrin of supporter Brittany Corliss.
It's all over again. What happened with England and France, England and Italy, it was just like, damn, again. Now it's been, 60 years or something like that, and we still haven't won. It's like over and over again. Like, when are we going to break the pattern? Do you understand? But next time, 2 years, we will be there in the final winning. By God's grace, please.
We shall see.
England was at the scene of a pretty big tennis match yesterday.
Yes, fittingly enough, it was won by a young Spaniard. Carlos Alcaraz, Faith, beat Novak Djokovic in straight sets to claim the Wimbledon title. Alcaraz, the youngest male player to win both the French Open and Wimbledon in the same year then. But the 21-year-old insists this is just the beginning.
It's a really great start of my career, but I have to keep going. At the end of my career, I want to sit at the same table as the big guys. It doesn't matter that I've already won 4 Grand Slam. If I'm not keep going, these tournaments, for me, it doesn't matter.
Oof. Aim high, as they say. Just 20 more Grand Slam titles then to tie Djokovic and Margaret Court for the most ever. If you've watched Alcaraz play, don't think you'd bet against that happening sometime.
Have a good day. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Thanks.
Sounds good.
That's Scott Reguer from your CBC Sports Desk. Just about 7:30 here on Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. In theory, it makes sense. If we add more traffic lanes, it will fix traffic jams. The reality, however, is a bit more of a bumpy ride. We'll have that story in our next half hour of the program. If you see issues on your commute, 204-788-3093 will tell you more after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is 17 with light rain in Winnipeg. The severe thunderstorms have now moved off to the east. We're looking for a mix of sun and clouds once the system passes, a high today of 24. Winnipeg's African soccer community is mourning the death of one of its players after he was shot Saturday night. Winnipeg police confirm they are investigating a shooting death. Godi Katembo is president of the Canada African Cup of Nations. He says around midnight, shortly after the last match ended at the Ralph Cantafio Soccer Complex on Waverley, he heard gunshots in the parking lot. Katembo says he urged people to get into the clubhouse and lock the door, and then he called police.
We are all in shock. We're in grief. We're in pain. We're bleeding inside our hearts. And our staff, our volunteers, our players, the fans, the entire community, we're all traumatized.
Katembo doesn't believe the shooting was connected to the soccer match because there was no fighting after the game. He says they created the league to keep young people off the streets and out of trouble. Power is out for a large part of South Osborne this morning. Manitoba Hydro says the area south of Confusion Corner to Baltimore is in the dark. It says it is expected to be, power is expected to be restored by about 10 o'clock this morning. A video inside an RCMP jail cell in the Paw and obtained by CBC News is highlighting why police detachments are not ideal places to house intoxicated people. John Edaway Capo died in 2019 after being picked up from outside a radio station and placed in a cell. The video shows another man inadvertently place his leg on Edaway Capo's neck, where it stays for 40 minutes. The medical examiner in an inquest said it had that leg not been there, Edaway Capo may have survived the night. Howard Morton is the former director of the Ontario Special Investigations Unit.
It's just inhumane. We have to treat all of us better, and particularly who have a major health issue like alcohol addiction. We have to be more humane in the way we treat them.
RCMP policy was not followed. Civilian guards who were hired to watch inmates are supposed to do physical checks every 15 minutes, but that did not happen. A judge will write a final report and will make recommendations to the province to try to prevent similar deaths from occurring. A search of a Winnipeg area landfill for the remains of 2 Indigenous women is one step closer. A healing lodge has been moved onto the site, meters from where the women's remains are believed to be. CBC's Riley Lachuk reports.
Just outside of Winnipeg, it's a space families and loved ones will soon gather. A healing center meters away from where a search for the remains of 2 Indigenous women will soon begin.
Now it's just time to bring my cousin home.
Melissa Robinson is the cousin of Morgan Harris. She is one of the women who searchers will soon begin looking for, among 4 women killed by convicted serial killer Jeremy Skibitsky. The healing center is part of the work the Manitoba government has started ahead of the search. Also part of that work, a test dig in the landfill that Robinson says provided valuable information about what the families and searchers will be up against.
The test ground that they were digging up looks amazing, and receipts within that garbage are legible.
Riley Lachuk, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Fallout from Saturday's assassination attempt on Donald Trump.
But in America, we resolve our differences at the battle box. You know, that's how we do it, at the battle box, not with bullets.
U.S. President Joe Biden, in an address to the nation last night from the Oval Office, Biden's appeal for calm comes as the Republican Leadership Convention opens today in Milwaukee and the investigation continues into the shooting. The second of 4 installments of this year's carbon tax rebate are being deposited or mailed out today to millions of Canadian households. The Canada Carbon Rebate returns 90% of the revenue Ottawa collects from the consumer carbon levy to households in 8 provinces. BC and Quebec have their own carbon pricing systems and do not receive the federal rebate. Well, you can hear more national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. With a deadline approaching, pro-Palestinian protesters at the University of Manitoba say they're not done yet. They've been given until 8 this morning and half an hour to dismantle their encampment or face legal action. Victoria Kanhura is a spokesperson for the encampment and says they are retaining legal counsel in case they get hit with a court injunction for their removal.
We are well prepared to resist this. Our goal is really to stand against the genocide and to ensure that our tuition dollars and our presence at the University of Manitoba is not used for harm. It is not used to violate human rights.
The protesters will hold a press conference later this morning to discuss next steps. And the federal government is delivering a formal apology to Dakota and Lakota First Nations today. The Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations will be in Whitecap, Dakota Nation, to meet with 9 First Nations from Manitoba and Saskatchewan. When numbered treaties were signed in the 1870s, Canada refused to sign a deal with them because they were viewed as American refugees. The nations argue they occupied areas of what is now Canada before the arrival of settlers. Dakota Plains Wahpeton Nation Chief Donnie Smoke.
It's just a start, in the spirit of truth and reconciliation, and we're hoping that whatever government's in continues to treat us as a nation and hears us. And, all we're trying to do is better the lives of our children.
Smoke wants economic reconciliation with government as well as a government duty to consult on upcoming matters. You can find more news at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. Magandang umaga, good morning Manitoba. Faith Fundal here in Studio 15 at Portage and Spence. In for Marcy Marcusa, this is Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. Hello to the folks who are streaming us on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Bradley is our streaming producer. Abby Adiemi is our tech and music producer, also following the weather. Good morning.
Good morning once again. Yes, that severe thunderstorm warning has ended and has moved. It's currently 19 in the city. We're seeing light rain. And once this rain is done, you should be expecting a mix of sun and clouds. And then we might see a slight chance of afternoon thunderstorm and showers again. We'll be heading to a high of 24. Brandon is currently sitting at 13 with light rains at the moment, and once this ends, you will also get a mix of sun and clouds. More possible showers late in the afternoon with a risk of thunderstorm, and you'd see some breezy conditions. Highs around 24. Thompson at 10 degrees at the moment with light rain showers. Also expect mainly cloudy skies to stay with you once this session of the rain goes, and then a slight chance of showers in the afternoon returns. We'll get to a high of 14 for folks in Thompson. Churchill is currently at 1, also seeing light rain. Rain will be ending this morning, and then we'll see cloudy skies with fog patches here and there, which will be dissipating by the noon period, and will touch base with a high of 6. Dauphin is currently at 16 and cloudy at the moment. We'll see a mix of sun and clouds today. A slight chance of showers late in the afternoon, coming with a risk of thunderstorm. Highs around 22. Gimli sitting at 16 with light rain also at this moment. For the Interlake region, expect a mix of sun and clouds later, and a slim chance of showers late in the afternoon with a risk of thunderstorm. The highs will be around 24. Steinbach at 16, also seeing light rain, a mix of sun and clouds, and the forecast a slight chance of showers in the afternoon, coming with a risk of thunderstorm. Highs around 24. And finally, Morris at 15 with moderate rain. For the Pembina Valley region, today expect a mix of sun and clouds once this rain is gone, and then a return of a slim chance of showers late in the afternoon, also with a risk of thunderstorm, and we'll see highs of 24. For the most part of the south, we're heading to a high of 24. Right now in the city, we are at 19.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
It's Abby Adiemi with our tech and music producer with a look at the weather there. Still to come, we'll find out why easing traffic woes along Winnipeg's Route 90 might not be a smooth ride. That's still to come this half hour of the program at 21 minutes before 8 o'clock. Corey Funk is also following the commute to make sure that things are smooth, maybe?
Yeah, surprisingly, no issues along Route 90 so far this morning.
Good.
The one issue that there is out there, Morley and Osborne, the lights are flashing red right now, so you just treat that as a four-way stop. Other than that, things seem to be running fairly smoothly, still pretty vacation-y out there on the roads. But if you do see something going on, give me a call. If you're walking, biking, driving, busing, would love to hear from you. That number to call, 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks very much. Corey Funk, our studio director there, here on the program. Just about 20 minutes before 8 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. Ben Farr really likes two things: nerding into research and his hometown of Winnipeg. That's why today, in the first of a special series, Ben will lean into his twin passions in his new role as CBC Manitoba's urban living contributor for the Creator Network. My Hometown explores life in Winnipeg, how we live, what works, what doesn't, and how we can make the city better. In the first edition of My Hometown, Ben investigated the pros and cons of the Route 90 expansion project. Anyone who has been stuck in traffic on that commute knows it's not often an easy ride, and adding more lanes will ease those traffic woes, right? Well, according to Ben, not so fast. Ben is in studio. Good morning.
Thanks for having me.
Ben, is funny because every time we talk about Route 90, I always say, it's the Kenaston widening, but it actually is a lot more than that. Take us through Route 90. What are the big problems there?
Well, I mean, going back since as long as I can remember, there's been a lot of infrastructure issues, curbs that are damaged, potholes, but also it doesn't exactly feel safe to be walking there as a pedestrian. I can't imagine biking on that road. So that, on top of the fact that the St. James Bridge is definitely getting quite old, there's a lot of combined issues, transit, everything adding up. It just makes it not a pleasant experience for anyone who's on that road for any reason.
Yeah, every time I walk down there, as I try to take the bus, it's very, very loud. And yes, those are sort of feelings that come up for many folks. The city plans to spend $737 million in the project there. What will that buy us?
From everything that we can tell so far, there's going to be dedicated biking and walking lanes separate from the road, a bit of space there, traffic dampening sound barriers for the residents in the area, as well as 3 lanes of through traffic along that road from Taylor to Ness, and improvements, most importantly, to that St. James Bridge as well.
I mean, the simple part of it is you add more lanes, you will improve traffic flow. Seems to make sense, but you're saying not so fast.
From what we can see so far, looking to other projects like Toronto, for example, which we covered in that piece, there's a lot of added demand when you increase the space on the road. New cars coming, people who see the reduced commute times, and it eventually ends up just increasing it back to the same levels, which the city data actually found is likely to happen with this project as well.
You talk about Toronto, the 401. What happened there?
They started off with 4 lanes back in the 50s, and very quickly, within, I think it was 5 years, they ran out of space on the road, so they increased it all the way to 6 through lanes on each side. It's 12 total lanes, and fast forward to now, the capacity on that road is the usage on that road is way past the capacity, right. And it continues to increase year after year after year.
And part of what you're describing is induced demand, right? What is it for folks who might not know what that phrase means?
Induced demand, it's effectively just the people who use the road that wouldn't have used it in the past if there wasn't the added lanes. They'll take that, they'll choose that commute option, and they'll follow that path because there's the increased space, ultimately just bringing more usage to that road with the increased lanes.
So essentially, because it is a lot bigger and it seems to, for a moment in time, be easier and better to go through, it just increases and makes the problem worse, essentially.
Exactly. It's like the appeal, the shiny new object, the faster commute times, and then people end up just using the road more and more and more until it has the same problems it always had.
It's interesting because whoever you ask about the Route 90 expansion, people have a different opinion about whether it's worth the $737 million. I mean, what's your take on that?
It's definitely tough. I mean, that $737 million is coming away from schools, community centers, even other projects like rapid transit, which we've seen Southwest Transit, the new expansion for that going all the way to the university and beyond. it's had so much increased usage in the last 4 years. So there's alternatives to that. What about expanding rapid transit? I think it's tough to figure out what the best use for that is, but there's definitely a lot of options. I think it comes down to weighing what the best potential fixes are for now, and then looking into other options down the line to potentially even expand that further for more public transit options.
So the bottom line, will Winnipeg's commute be any easier with this expansion?
It may be nicer, but I think down the line it will continue. The traffic will remain over time, and that's always going to be a problem we face, which is where we want to start looking into other options, cycling, transit, even walking in that area when possible. And I think that this project gives us time to start planning for those future paths.
I'm looking forward to hearing more about your reports. Thank you for talking about this, and take good care.
Thank you.
Ben Farr, CBC Manitoba's new urban living commentator. You can see more on this series, My Hometown, which includes a great video on our website. It's there now, cbc.ca/Manitoba. That's cbc.ca/Manitoba.
School is out. Time to sleep in, ride your bike, summer camp. Remember that feeling? Fort White Alive wants to bring it back with The Great Escape, a one-night adult summer camp. Hike the trails, hop in a canoe, and play all kinds of games at CBC's tent. Plus, a dance party hosted by DJ K. Chetta and your choice of adult bevy. The Great Escape, July 25th at Fort White Alive. Proudly sponsored by CBC.
We're 15 minutes before 8 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. Okay, for folks who are watching our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream, Corey Funk and I are confused in studio.
I think there's a cricket in here.
So as we were speaking with Ben Farr there, I saw a big bug fly around, and it was big, so I tried to ignore it. And now I think it's still here.
I hear it making cricket noises or something.
They don't bite, do they?
No? I'll just say no.
We'll figure it out. You're in studio because there's a traffic update.
Yeah,
to tell
so
folks.
actually the lights at Osborne and Morley aren't just flashing, they're actually completely out right now. I got calls from both Jeff and John. And now just heads up, I know there is that power outage right now for a large part of South Osborne, and that power outage does run from Confusion Corner to Baltimore. And I actually asked John, is there any other intersections you see? He was actually happened to be driving right down Osborne. He says everything else is looking like the lights are up, but it really just seems to be at Osborne and Morley that those lights are completely out. And he said he's seeing people not treat it like a four-way stop, so just be really careful as you're approaching Osborne and Morley. You're not going to see any lights at all. Slow down, treat it like a four-way stop. That's my update for you. But if you see something else going on out there, keep in mind that power, Hydro says, is expected to be back on by 10 this morning in South Osborne, running from Confusion Corner to Baltimore. So just heads up there. Be patient if you don't have any lights in your house. 204-788-3093.
Maybe you can tell us if those crickets bite.
Yes,
somewhere in
I'm
here.
curious. Do crickets bite? If anyone has any entomologists listening, please let us know.
Thanks, Corey Funk.
Thank you.
Our studio director here on the program. We're at 12 and a half minutes before 8 o'clock. KCMQ is the latest artist to be featured in CBC Music's Meet the Producers. The Toronto-based artist only got into the production side of music a few years ago, but he quickly learned that he also likes playing the supporting role in other people's visions. This is KCMQ with Candy Boy.
Kisses from you in the morning time. It's a feeling that I'm missing. Every day of the week I think of you next to me. I want something like this to be endless. Softly I see us falling into a world where we live on the clouds. Coated with pink explosions, our feet hang over the edge without a sound. Would you be my candy boy? To be yours. The sweetest soul I've ever known. It's just your love that makes it so. It's so good. It's so good. It's so good. It's so good. Thinking of you as the day goes by. You got a smile that's contagious. My jelly bean, my gummy bear mystery. You're like a dream that is beyond the planets. Touch me ever so slowly. Let's make this moment last forevermore. Your eyes, your lips, your hello goodbyes. My sugar baby, we can share this cry.
That's Casey MQ with Candy Boy. You can learn more about Casey as part of CBC Music's Meet the Producers series on the website cbc.ca/music. John Edeway Capo was arrested for public intoxication in 2019. Within hours, he was dead in a jail cell. The tragic events were examined at an inquest last month where the 54-year-old's family finally learned what happened to him. The last moments of his life were also captured on video, which has been obtained by CBC News. I spoke to the I-Team's Caroline Bargut about this late last week.
Good morning.
What can you tell us about this video and the last night of Edeway Capo's life?
So John Edeway Capo lived in the Paw. He was always happy, always had a smile on his face. He was not aggressive, but he was homeless and he struggled with addictions. On October 5th, 2019, someone called the RCMP because he had been passed out in front of the radio station in the Paw. And so the police came and picked him up and took him to a jail cell where he spent the night. Now, when police placed him in the jail cell, they actually had to carry him in because he wasn't able to walk on his own. And when they placed him, there were already 2 other intoxicated people in there. Within hours, he was dead. Now, one of the other inmates who were in the cell was rolling around and inadvertently placed his leg on Edeway Capo's neck. And in the video, you can see Edeway Capo trying to remove the leg, but he wasn't able to. And the leg actually stayed on his neck for about 40 minutes. Now, this was all captured on security video inside the cell, which was played at the inquest, which was held at the end of June. Now, in the video, you can see all of this, and it's all just from one camera inside the cell. His son, Jeremy Edeway Capo, was at the inquest and saw this video and heard the testimony.
It was very heartbreaking because that gave me confirmation on what I felt like back then. Like, it was very emotional. Like, it was hard to hear, but it was also relief.
Now, Jeremy wanted us to get a copy of this video so that we could show it to people so that the public could understand that a jail cell is not the best place to put an intoxicated person.
And so we did get this video. How did we do that?
We did get the video, and it was quite the process, actually. We had to ask the inquest judge for access to this video, and then we had to present our case in court. Now, the lawyer for the RCMP told the judge that the RCMP didn't want this video released, and so we had to argue why it was in the public interest for us to get it. In the end, we had to agree to some conditions. So we're not allowed to show the RCMP officers as they bring Edeway Capo into the cell. We also can't show the part where the paramedics are working on him and trying to revive him at the end. And we had to blur the faces of the other inmates that were in the cell. Now, once we did this, we have to destroy the original copy, and then we have to write an affidavit and submit it to the court saying that we have destroyed this copy.
We had to essentially say why this was important for us to show the video. Talk more about that.
Mm-hmm. So everyone agrees that a jail cell, an RCMP jail cell, is not the most appropriate place to house an intoxicated person. You know, police are not healthcare workers. They're often on the road. And so in smaller communities, there aren't sobering centers like we have here in Winnipeg, the Main Street Project. So there isn't anywhere else to put intoxicated people. So they end up in jail cells. So officers are on the road, as I had mentioned. So civilian guards are hired and have to watch these inmates to make sure everything is okay. They have video cameras, but they're also supposed to do physical checks. They're supposed to get up and look inside the little window, make sure everybody's okay every 15 minutes. And we know that didn't happen in this case because the leg was on Edeway Capo's neck for 40 minutes. And it was actually 5 hours before anyone did a physical check. Edeway Capo had been dead before anyone even really noticed. An autopsy couldn't actually determine the cause of death, but the medical examiner did say that the leg did contribute. He testified in court and said there is every reason to believe he may have survived this period of time in the jail cell. Here's Jeremy again.
He could have had another day, could have had another month, could have had another year. Like, that's something that I'm very heartbroken about, and like learning about the events that how he passed, why he passed.
So Manitoba's Independent Investigations Unit is called in to investigate anytime there is a death in custody. Ultimately, they decided not to charge anyone. Now, Howard Morton is the former director of the Ontario Special Investigations Unit.
It's just inhumane. We have to treat all of us better, and particularly who have a major health issue. like alcohol addiction. We have to be more humane in the way we treat them.
Caroline, how often does an intoxicated person die in police custody?
So we did an investigation into this a few years ago, and it happens more often than you would think. You know, dozens of people across Canada over the past 10 years have died in jail cells after being detained for being intoxicated. Our investigation found that in a lot of these cases, policy wasn't followed. And steps were missed that were supposed to keep people safe. Now, as we drove home from the PAW, actually, we ended up stopping in Chemawawan First Nation, where another person had died in police custody. A young woman died in March 2023. She was 23 years old. Her name was Janine Walker. Now, she was picked up for being intoxicated and housed in the jail cell. She was found unresponsive 15 hours later. Now, her father, Vernon Highway, went to the detachment to pick her up the next morning, and he discovered she was dead.
I was stunned, shocked. It's like it wanted to be a dream, but it's not. And I just kept screaming and yelling, and I said, I want to see her, and they wouldn't let us. They wouldn't allow us to see. Said it has to be investigated. Investigate what you guys do to her.
The family is still waiting to hear what happened in the investigation. The Independent Investigations Unit, the IIU, is still looking into this. We don't know any information, but eventually an inquest will be held into her death, so we'll find out more.
What about in the Edaway Kapo's case? What happens there?
So the inquest did wrap up after 5 days of testimony. The judge heard from witnesses, and he will write a final report, which will have some recommendations in it. Now, Ben Wickstrom was the inquest crown.
I think it's important when people die in situations like this that we remember them by taking a hard look at the circumstances of their death, and it's a way to honor them, and I hope that we did that.
So inquests are held to make sure that similar cases like this don't happen. So they're looking for ways to prevent this in the future. So the judge will write a final report, will make recommendations, but ultimately it will be up to the province to determine which or any of the recommendations will be implemented.
Thanks for this, Caroline.
Thanks.
Caroline Bergut, reporter with CBC Manitoba's I-Team. She'll have more on this story tonight on your CBC Winnipeg News at 6 and as well on our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba. We're 2.5 minutes before the top of the hour. Over to our CBC Winnipeg local news desk. Heather Wells joining us now. Good morning.
Good morning. A local soccer organization says it is traumatized and shocked after a player was killed in a shooting late Saturday night. It happened at the Ralph Cantafio Soccer Complex on Waverley following matches. A statement from the Canada-Africa Cup of Nations says as players were leaving, a shooting happened in the parking lot, and it goes on to say the player, who is not being identified, died after sustaining serious upper body injuries. We'll hear more. And with the deadline just minutes away, pro-Palestinian protesters at the University of Manitoba say they are not done yet. They've been given until 8 o'clock this morning to dismantle their encampment or face legal action. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. I'm Faith Fundal. Despite an assassination attempt on former U.S. President Donald Trump over the weekend, one of the key events in the race to the White House begins today. We'll talk about the Republican National Convention here on the program. If you have issues on your commute, 2047-883-0932, 2047-883-0993. The lights are out at Morley and Osborne, so be prepared for that. Treat it as an all-way stop.
On Cue with Tom Power. Jennifer Esposito grew up around the mafia on Staten Island before she left to pursue acting. After being fed up with the lack of opportunity for women in the industry, she decided to tap into her childhood for her debut feature film. She'll be here to tell you all about it.
Some questions are just better left unanswered.
That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdelmahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current.
I'm Duncan McHugh. Diabetes patients in South Africa are running out of insulin pens, all because the company that makes them is selling them instead to people in the West, who are using them to inject new weight loss drugs. That story coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Donald Trump says a tilt of his head likely saved his life. The former U.S. president is giving his first interview since Saturday's assassination attempt. He told the New York Post he is supposed to be dead. President Joe Biden condemned the attack in an address from the Oval Office last night. Biden says it is time to lower the temperature in American politics. Today, the Republican Party kicks off its national convention in Milwaukee. The CBC's Ithil Musa is there. And Ithil, what can you tell us as this convention begins?
Well, right now, downtown Milwaukee has pretty much shut down with heavy security inside and outside the venue. Organizers, appeared in good spirits yesterday while they were setting things up. And today, the convention floor is clear and prepped to receive delegates as the 4-day event gets underway. Trump's campaign and RNC organizers say everything will go ahead as planned. The Secret Service says they've made no changes to their convention security plans, which were in the works for more than a year after the attempted assassination. Biden held an address last night urging Americans to lower the political temperature, to take a step back, and to resolve differences peacefully.
Disagreement is inevitable in American democracy. It's part of human nature. But politics must never be a literal battlefield, and God forbid, a killing field.
What do we know about this ongoing investigation into the shooting?
The FBI is treating the incident as an assassination attempt and a potential act of domestic terrorism. There are a lot of questions, of course, concerning the motive behind Saturday's shooting, but the federal agency says the shooter's reasoning is still not known. Investigators are still reviewing the evidence, and they're conducting interviews to try and piece things together. The shooter's home and the vehicle were searched, and while suspicious devices were found, they were eventually rendered safe by FBI bomb technicians. The FBI also says the firearm that was used in the shooting was purchased legally, and the shooter was not known to them prior to the incident. Meanwhile, the deputy director of the FBI says agents have seen increasingly violent rhetoric online since the attack on Trump.
Thank you, Ithil.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Ithil Musa in Milwaukee. Light rain and cool temperatures are forecast for Labrador City. Officials say that will help crews stamp out a fire threatening the community. Thousands of people are out of their homes. And as Heather Gillis reports, they don't know when they can return.
There is no fire growth. There's little smoke and not very much flame. And it was a good day from a firefighting perspective.
Labrador City Mayor Belinda Adams says weather has been on their side in helping keep the flames down. And rain is in the forecast today, helping the 4 water bombers and 4 helicopters on the Labrador side trying to extinguish the fire. More are on the Quebec side. Days ago, it was an inferno just a few kilometers from Labrador City, a fire strong enough to generate its own wind, forcing thousands to flee to Happy Valley Goose Bay, 500 kilometers away. Today, the province is expected to announce details about emergency payments for evacuees. Nearly 4,000 have registered for help with the Red Cross. Meanwhile, thousands more in Wabush are still on evacuation alert, with many in need of food, baby items, and medication. Problems Mayor Ron Barron hopes they'll have solutions for soon.
Hopefully in the morning we will be able to release what we're going to do there, so stay patient, folks.
Officials are still cautioning the fire is still unpredictable, meaning it's too early to say when evacuees could return home. Heather Gillis, CBC News, Happy Valley Goose Bay.
Canada's premiers are holding their annual meeting in Halifax, and they've invited Indigenous leaders to join them for a working lunch on healthcare. But there's a big rift in this relationship, and as Olivia Stefanovich reports, Indigenous leaders say what they want is to be treated as equals.
Well, I would like to put out an offer.
For the first time in 8 years, Natan Obed is returning to the Council of the Federation. The Inuit Tapiri Kanatami president meeting with a new crop of premiers to send this message.
That we just respect each other and our jurisdictions, and when we come together and meet, that there is inherent respect.
Obed declined previous invitations to attend from the premiers, citing concerns over the meeting's format.
It unfortunately has been a regressive space.
Not much has changed since Obed last attended in 2016. National Indigenous leaders still only get one short meeting with the premiers, excluded from the rest of the week's agenda.
Changing these systems, I recognize, takes a long time. It takes a lot of relationship building, awareness raising.
Métis National Council President Cassidy Caron called for a reset at the last Premier's meeting. She remains hopeful.
So it is in the best interest of these premiers to find the best ways to serve Métis people. And the best ways to serve Métis people is to work with our Métis governments and provide that support.
The premiers have set aside 2.5 hours today to hear from Indigenous leaders over lunch. Whether they will all listen and respond to a request for full inclusion remains an open question. Olivia Stefanovic, CBC News, Halifax.
Voters in Rwanda are lining up to elect their next president. Some people arrived as early as 5 a.m. to make sure they could cast their ballot. Paul Kagame is the incumbent president. He has ruled Rwanda for nearly a quarter of a century. And although 8 candidates applied to run against him, only 2 made it to the final list. Kagame is expected to cruise to another victory today. We have an update to a story CBC News first brought you in May about Canada's first accessibility commissioner and claims he mistreated staff at the Canadian Human Rights Commission. The investigation into those claims is now complete, but as Ashley Burke tells us, the details are being kept private.
The government called it a historic appointment, hiring Canada's first accessibility commissioner in 2022. But within Michael Gottel's first year on the job, a group of staff at the Canadian Human Rights Commission raised concerns about his workplace conduct. A letter viewed by CBC News alleged Gottel had a toxic impact and there was a psychologically and unsafe work environment. Gottel's lawyer says his clients never seen that letter and responded to the workplace concerns raised with him by taking part in an external investigation that the government launched. The investigation by Quintet Consulting has now wrapped up. The Justice Department says its minister reviewed the final report and has asked Gottel and the Commission to address the report's recommendations, but wouldn't say what the findings are, citing privacy concerns. The Canadian Human Rights Commission says it accepts the report's recommendations and work is underway to implement them, but wouldn't say what they are, citing confidentiality. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
Immigration lawyers and agencies say a decades-old scam is targeting temporary foreign workers in Alberta. It involves employers, consultants, and recruiters. Advocates say in some cases they are illegally charging applicants tens of thousands of dollars for jobs. Karina Zapata has the story.
The temporary foreign workers, they don't often know better. They don't realize that this isn't the process and this isn't how you're supposed to do it.
Anila Amar, CEO of the Center for Newcomers, has been watching the scam play out for 30 years. She says it's historically been more common in cities like Vancouver and Toronto, but she says it's happening more frequently in Alberta.
We could have a couple of people a week coming to the center saying that they have a similar issue.
It's illegal to charge people for jobs or to help them find jobs in Canada. But those who work in the immigration space say it does happen due to a poorly structured system, a lack of enforcement, and desperation. It all sounds familiar to Sinajabeen Sheikh. She says she paid roughly $40,000 in installments to a group of immigration consultants and recruiters for a job as a food service supervisor in Calgary. But she says the described job did not resemble the tasks she was given.
It's really sad. It's heartbreaking. I've lost my resources. I've lost my finances. I've lost my, hope.
Sheikh's former employer denies it's affiliated with any immigration consultants and says her work duties aligned with her job description. The federal government says it's aware of the scam and is working to tackle it. But immigration lawyer Jathan Shori says that's a difficult feat because it goes beyond Canada.
The networks that are built overseas, how are you going to regulate that? That's not possible.
Meanwhile, the College of Immigration and Citizenship Consultants says it's cracking down on unauthorized practitioners in Canada. Karina Zapata, CBC News, Calgary.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Magandang umaga. Good morning, Manitoba. Faith Fundal here in Studio 15 at Portage and Spence. Hello as well to the folks streaming us on your CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. This is Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. Despite an assassination attempt on former U.S. President Donald Trump over the weekend, one of the key events in the race to the White House begins today. We're going to talk about the Republican National Convention here on Information Radio, on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app. Brad Lillies is our streaming producer. And over to your CBC Winnipeg local news desk, Heather Wells is our news anchor, news person today. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, Winnipeg's African soccer community is mourning the death of one of its players after he was shot Saturday night. Police confirm they are investigating a shooting death. Godi Katembo is president of the Canada-Africa Cup of Nations. He says it happened around midnight, shortly after the last match ended at the Ralph Cantafio Soccer Complex on Waverley. He heard gunshots in the parking lot. We'll hear more about what happened. And a long time coming is how Dakota Chiefs feel about a federal government apology today. The Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations is going to be in Whitecap, Dakota Nation near Saskatoon, meeting with 9 Lakota and Dakota First Nations from Saskatchewan and Manitoba. Sioux Valley Dakota Nation Chief Vincent Tatchin says the apology is for the label put on Dakota as being refugees after they came north following a conflict with the U.S. in the 1800s. I'll be back with more on that and other news from Manitoba coming up at 8:30.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. We're at 12 minutes after 8 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. Abby Adiemi has been following the weather from nothing to severe thunderstorm warning to
now 17.
Nothing.
17 in the city. Light rain shower we're seeing out there, though we're expecting that to leave us for now. And then we'd expect a mix of sun and clouds once that is gone. But, however, there's still a slim chance of these showers returning late in the afternoon, coming with a risk of thunderstorm and breezy conditions from the north, and we will see a high of a 24. And the same condition will get into the evening period, partly cloudy, still slim chance of showers and a risk of thunderstorm, though we're going to cool off to 13, so it looks like a cool day. Up north, Thompson, the rain is stopped at the moment. You are at 10 degrees. It's mainly cloudy there. That showers may return later. Churchill is seeing light rain at the moment at 2. Now, down south, most regions cloudy from Brandon to Morris. The rain is stopped for Brandon. You're at 17 at the moment. It's mostly cloudy, 16 at Dauphin. Gimli, once the rain ends, you see a mix of sun and clouds. Steinbach, the same condition once it ends. But we're seeing temperatures between 16 and 17 at the moment, and all the regions heading to a high of 24. Currently, Winnipeg, 17 degrees. We're still seeing some light showers out there. Once that clears up, we'll see a mix of sun and clouds, and we're heading to a high of 24.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
That's Abby Adiemi, our tech and music producer. Corey Funk is our studio director, watching the commute. Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, the only issue out there right now that I know of is at Morley and Osborne. The lights are actually completely out right now. I heard from both Jeff and John that actually some people that are even seeing not treating it as a four-way stop. So treat it as a four-way stop. Some people are blowing through. Super dangerous. Be very careful there. And that may be possibly due to the fact that there is a hydro outage right in that area. It runs roughly from Confusion Corner down to Baltimore in the South Osborne area. Hydro says that lights are supposed to be back on hopefully by about 10 a.m. this morning, but I haven't heard of any other intersections being impacted by that yet. But if you do see something going out there, or if you don't see something like some lights on, give me a call on the CBC commuter line, whether you're walking, biking, driving. Would love to hear from you. That number to call, 204-788-3093.
15 minutes after 8 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1, I'm Faith Fundal. The Republican National Convention is set to go ahead today in the United States. Despite an attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump on the weekend, the shooting took place at a campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania on Saturday and left one attendee dead, 2 other spectators critically injured, and Trump shot in the ear. The suspect was shot and killed by the Secret Service. Audrey Haynes is an associate professor of political science at the University of Georgia, director of the Applied Politics program. She is in Athens, Georgia. Good morning.
Good morning, Faye.
Let's talk about this weekend shooting. What else do we know so far about that and the subsequent investigation?
Well, the facts have been trickling in since Saturday, and we know that a 20-year-old white male high school graduate named Thomas Matthew Crooks, he was from Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, which is about an hour away from the rally location. He used an AR-style rifle that was purportedly purchased by his father 6 months ago. He was able to get 8 shots out before being killed by at least one Secret Service member. And he had been working at a nursing home as a dietary aide, and ironically would have been able to vote in this next presidential election for the first time. He was a registered Republican in Pennsylvania, and when he was 17, he did donate $15 to a Democratic organization. And that's really all we know about this young man, aside from the fact that when speaking to his friends, he is considered to be nice, polite. He made good grades, did not seem to have any problems with his family, did not make the rifle team in school, and was a member, I believe, of a shooting range or gun club. Now, the two key questions are what was his motive? They're trying to investigate that. Now the FBI is working on getting into his phone and hoping that will shed some light on his motivation. It is assumed that he was working alone. The second question is how in the world did he manage to get so close to the former president? Because he was less than or close to 150 yards away in a building that many people should have thought to be in the lockdown area that the Secret Service will lock down and make sure is secure. Supposedly, there was a security individual who climbed up the roof and saw him, and at that point, he turned his rifle to him. The security person went back down as they were afraid of being shot, and that is exactly when Crooks started firing at the former president, wounding him in the ear, killing one individual who had covered his family to protect them, and shooting 2 others who are now in stable condition.
So a lot more questions that need to be answered. I know here in Canada, the political leaders have said not much outside of denouncing the shooting. What about in America? What has the political reaction been like?
Well, the political reaction immediately was very similar, denouncing the rhetoric. People were all over X, previously called Twitter, talking about, okay, who's come out, who hasn't, why hasn't President Biden put out, a message yet? There are criticisms about how it took an hour. There are criticisms from both sides and finger pointing already, even though everyone is coming together and saying, this political violence doesn't belong in our system. No one should be saying the kind of rhetoric that spurs people to take this kind of action, all the while not knowing why this individual, who it is also said had no history of mental health issues, decided on this day to attempt to shoot the former president, Donald Trump. At the same time, we see a narrative being generated from the Republican side that continues this notion of persecution. That is a part of the narrative that we've seen, that has come out in fundraising emails, that is part of the spin. It's like, they can't keep former President Trump down. They've persecuted him. They've continued to persecute him. So we may see some of that rhetoric emerging at the convention. And Democrats will likely push back saying, we've been through this. You guys are the ones who have ratcheted up the rhetoric. Words have consequences, and this is the end result. So even though everyone is taking that line, I'm not sure they're doing what needs to be done to actually change the situation.
Right. And of course, all eyes are on battleground state Wisconsin because the Republicans are gathering there for the national convention. Donald Trump will arrive there and is arriving there as well. One of the things that's sort of the big question is who will be the vice president candidate? Who are the folks who might be part of the big list?
Well, in true Trump fashion, we have this scenario where no one really knows who it's going to be. We've had these candidates, much like The Apprentice, right? Who is going to be the vice president to Donald J. Trump? And instead of "you're fired," we're going to finally hear "you're hired," and we don't know who that's going to be. The three top candidates in terms of what people believe will be the outcome are North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, Florida Senator Marco Rubio, and Ohio Senator J.D. Vance. Rubio and Burgum in many ways are considered very normal Republicans. J.D. Vance is considered a little bit more of a firebrand. And there are others in the mix who will be there. In addition, Nikki Haley will be at the convention and will have a speaking role.
Interesting.
So we just learned that over the weekend, and that was not something that had been on the original list. And I will tell you, one thing that has come out is that President Trump did an interview last night, and he said that he's torn up his original convention speech, and he's rewritten one, and it's going to be about uniting the country. And so there's some people who are saying that this has been a moment where, he has had a change. And so who knows? The party belongs to Donald Trump at this point. So whatever lead he takes, others may follow. So we'll see what happens.
Audrey, Canadians have been talking about what needs to be done to take the temperature down from here. What's your sense from your perspective about what the answer to that question might be?
Well, sustained discussion of the fact that, Americans should not be looking at each other as the enemy. I mean, it really takes what we call, real politics is about getting together, bargaining, compromising, reaching solutions to problems that are real, not just saying things that make other people angry or not accusing people of doing things and taking small things and turning them into major threats. So everything is an existential threat. And that is true from Democrats saying that Trump is going to end democracy to Trump saying that, the country's falling to pieces and that's the fault of Democrats and that, everything you love is going to be destroyed by these woke Democrats. Most of the time, there is little truth to most of the rhetoric, right? All these problems are actually really complex things, and there are lots of factors that have an impact on them, not just, one person, doing one thing that you don't like. So we're going to have to see them actually do a lot more. And, we go through these cycles, and hopefully we are going to a cycle where we've sort of hit the crest, and maybe we'll see people start behaving much better because it really does require everyone to do it, not just one person for 2 days.
Really good of you to come on the show. Thank you, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon. Take good care.
Thank you, Faith.
Audrey Haynes is an associate professor of political science at the University of Georgia, director of the Applied Politics program. Dominic LeBlanc is Canada's public safety minister. He is speaking with reporters right now in New Brunswick about what he did following that attempted assassination of former U.S. President Donald Trump. He was speaking in French. Here's part of what he had to say. You will hear the voice of the interpreter.
I can tell you yesterday I did have a briefing with the director of CSIS and with the RCMP. They talked about the extent of the threat. They talked about their increased vigilance now. And the RCMP commissioner confirmed to me that security measures around the Prime Minister are in place. I also got in touch with Mr. Poilievre yesterday myself to assure him that the RCMP is at work. The RCMP will therefore be taking any necessary measures, and I'm fully confident in the work of the RCMP and the work of CSIS as well, and of course their ability to secure information and cooperate with police forces. Recently, there's been a lot of talk about the toxic environment around elected officials. We've also seen what happened with Jagmeet Singh. Now, given what has happened in the United States, are you more concerned, more worried about the situation now? Or has your conversation with authorities reassured you? Well, I'm certainly reassured in the sense that I know the RCMP is able to take whatever necessary steps they believe are required. And I know that they're working hard to secure any necessary intelligence and information and pass it on. And I recognize, and we saw this in the public space, a number of different officials, municipal and federal officials, are facing threats in this democracy. And obviously, people in a democracy have the right to express themselves through an election and get involved in politics. And we're always concerned when we see violent incidents such as the one that occurred in the United States. I also spoke to Secretary Mayorkas, who's in charge of Homeland Security. And it's funny, I was in Washington last week, and at that time we talked about the risk of potential violence against politicians in their country and in ours. And then we see what happened on Saturday night. So I spoke to him again yesterday. Obviously, we work very closely with our U.S. partners and will continue to do so.
Are you worried about yourself personally holding public events after what happened at the Trump rally?
No, I have every confidence that the RCMP take all the steps necessary to protect Canadian politicians. Yesterday I convened a briefing with the Commissioner of the RCMP, the Director of CSIS, the Deputy Minister of Public Safety. They went through the threat landscape. They talked to me about the additional vigilance that they've put in place since the assassination attempt on former President Trump Saturday evening. CSIS is always at work collecting information that helps the RCMP adjust the security posture where necessary. You'll understand that we don't discuss details of particular security measures. That's one of the pieces of advice that we get. But I am confident that the RCMP will do what's necessary to protect elected leaders in Canada. I exchanged text messages with Mr. Poliev yesterday as well to assure him that the RCMP were in contact with his office. And there again, all of the appropriate steps will be in place to ensure that people can participate in a democracy in a safe way. If you want to change the government, you participate in an election and you go to vote. You don't engage in acts of political violence. That's what's so disturbing about what we saw with former President Trump on Wednesday evening, where innocent people participating in a political event were severely injured, and in the case of one person lost his life. That's obviously worrisome in every democracy. I was in Washington last week and met with Secretary Mayorkas, the Homeland Security Secretary, and on Wednesday evening we actually discussed the increased risk of violence in political campaigns and against political leaders. And then when I spoke to him Saturday evening, when we saw what had happened at President Trump's rally, it reminded us of the importance of working together and taking all the steps that are necessary.
Speaking just moments ago, that is Dominic LeBlanc, Canada's Public Safety Minister, answering questions about the attempted assassination of former U.S. President Donald Trump.
Whether it's breaking news from around the world, across the country, or in your own hometown, it's all at your fingertips on the CBC News app. Get the top stories from where you live under the local tab, or watch video clips, live events, and the national on your smartphone or tablet. Get all the news you want, when you want it, where you want it, with the CBC News app. Download the app for free today.
We're at 29 minutes after 8 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. Larry called the commuter line to tell us that the lights at Gracie and Lagimodiere are flashing red. So that's Gracie and the Lage. There are some delays as people treat it as a four-way stop, as you should as well be aware of that. And there is a power outage out, a pretty large one, in South Osborne. And because of that, it looks like Morley and Osborne, the lights are flashing red in all directions. And in some cases, we're actually being told that they're fully out now. So treat that as an always stop before proceeding into that intersection. That's Morley and Osborne. If you see other issues, We have a bit of time to let the folks out there know. Call our commuter line 204-788-3093, 204-788-3093. I'm Faith Fundal here on Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, we still have some light rain out there. It is 17 degrees right now, a high today of 24. We will see some sun once this system moves out. A fatal shooting outside a soccer complex on Waverley has left Winnipeg's African community in shock. Police confirm they are investigating a shooting and are expected to release more information later today. Godi Katembo is president of the Canada African Cup of Nations. He says they were holding a tournament on Saturday night. Katembo says it was around midnight after the final game of the match wrapped up when he heard shots.
But then as soon as I heard, the sound, pop, pop, I looked up and I did not see anything. And I immediately requested everybody to go to the clubhouse for the safety of everybody and lock down the doors.
Katembo doesn't believe the shooting is related to the soccer match. He says it is very upsetting because they created the league to help keep young people safe. A video inside an RCMP jail cell in the Paw and obtained by CBC News is highlighting why police detachments are not ideal places to house intoxicated people. John Edaway Capo was arrested for public intoxication in 2019 and died in a jail cell. An inquest was held last month where his family watched the last moments of his life, which were captured on video. CBC I-Team's Caroline Bargout has the story.
In the video, you can see RCMP officers carrying John Edaway Capo into a jail cell and placing him on the floor next to two other inmates. At one point, one of the men inadvertently rested his leg on Edaway Capo's neck, and it stayed there for 40 minutes. The medical examiner testified at the inquest that had the leg been removed sooner, he may have survived the night. Jeremy Edaway Capo has been waiting 5 years to find out what happened to his dad.
He could have had another day, could have had another month, could have had another year. That's something that I'm very heartbroken about.
The inquest heard 5 days of testimony from witnesses, including that RCMP policy wasn't followed. Civilian guards who are hired to watch inmates are supposed to do physical checks every 15 minutes, but that didn't happen. A judge will write a final report and make recommendations to the province to try to prevent similar deaths from occurring. Caroline Bargout, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Melissa Robinson says she will continue to fight for other Indigenous women even after her cousin is found. The trial of serial killer Jeremy Skibitsky wrapped up last week. Skibitsky was found guilty of killing Morgan Harris and 3 other women. But Robinson says her family won't be able to process Harris's death until the search for her remains in a Winnipeg landfill wraps up.
It's time to just get this going. This is the final piece that we need for our closure, so we can then start grieving our loss, because we haven't been able to.
Robinson says the pilot search of the Prairie Green landfill is going well. She says after it's all over, she'll push for a Brady Road landfill search next. Police searched for Tanya Nipanak's body there more than a decade ago, but she was never found. Power is out for a large part of South Osborne this morning. Manitoba Hydro says the area south of Confusion Corner all the way to Baltimore is in the dark. Hydro says power is expected to be restored by about 10 o'clock this morning. The second of 4 installments of this year's carbon tax rebate are being deposited or mailed out today to millions of Canadian households. The Canada Carbon Rebate returns 90% of the revenue Ottawa collects from the consumer carbon levy to households in 8 provinces. BC and Quebec have their own carbon pricing systems and do not receive the federal rebate. Well, a long time coming is how Dakota chiefs feel about a federal government apology today. The Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations will be in Whitecap, Dakota Nation near Saskatoon, meeting with 9 Lakota and Dakota First Nations from Saskatchewan and Manitoba. Sioux Valley Dakota Nation Chief Vincent Tatchin says the apology is for the label put on the Dakota as being refugees after they came north following conflict with the U.S. in the 1800s.
I know there's several generations and grandparents and others that have endured a lifetime of living with this label, And it's unfortunate that they're not around to hear the apology.
Tachin says the refugee label has allowed all levels of government to prevent Dakota Nation members from accessing certain services and benefits. He says the apology marks a small step in repairing the damage. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. Corey Funk is back for an update on the traffic. Last look at the traffic.
Yeah, a couple issues with lights here in the city. First off, Morley and Osborne, the lights are completely out. There is a hydro outage in that area right now. Haven't heard of any other intersections that are out because of it, but that outage is running from south, the Confusion Corner, running south to Baltimore, so do look out for that. Hydro says it should be back on by 10 a.m. Also got a call from Larry, Grassy and Lage, Modiere. The lights are flashing red. Maybe some delays for you there as well. Pretty busy intersection. If you see anything else, 204-788-3093.
And you will tell folks during Radio Noon.
Yes, exactly. That's right. I am hosting Radio Noon this afternoon. So,
Abby Adiemi, the weather?
17 in the city. We're still seeing light rain. This will clear up, and then we'll see a mix of sun and clouds and a slight return of the rain showers later in the afternoon. Some thunderstorm might come with that. We're heading to a high of 24. Up north, Thompson seeing light rain, heading to a high of 14. Churchill is clear at the moment. It's going to be clearing off that rain, and we'll see a high of 6. Down south, Dauphin, Brandon, Gimli, Steinbach, Maurice, expect a mix of sun and clouds once the rain clears off, and we'll be seeing highs around 24.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Abby Adiemi, our tech and music producer. Thanks very much to the folks who are watching on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Brad Lillies is our streaming producer. Mag-ingat po kayo and take good care wherever you are. I'm Faith Fundal. Stay tuned. The Current is next.